The town called her worthless, until she became the only one who could save them all. What happens when a woman sold like cattle becomes the warrior nobody saw coming? When the land itself rises up to crush a man who thought he knew every inch of it? When three outcasts face down an empire built on steel and lies? This is that story. Stay until the end. Hit that like button. Drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this journey goes. Because what you're about to hear changes everything. The mountain took Elias Vance on a Tuesday. Not with warning, not with mercy. Just 10,000 tons of Colorado mud and shattered pine that came down like the fist of something older than law, older than towns, older than the railway companies that thought they owned every goddamn thing between the plains and the sky. He'd been checking the upper fence line when it happened. 15 years he'd walked that ridge, knew every rock, every shifting grade of soil. 15 years of watching the seasons turn, of listening to what the land told him through the soles of his boots and the way the wind moved through the spruce. None of it mattered. The ground just opened. That's the only way to describe it. Like the mountain decided it was done holding things together. The sound came first. Not a roar, more like a deep groan from somewhere beneath the world. Then movement. Massive, unstoppable, indifferent. Elias had maybe 2 seconds to understand what was happening before the wave of earth and debris hit him. He tried to run. Stupid instinct. Might as well try to outrun weather. The impact knocked him sideways, threw him against a lodgepole pine that had probably stood there for a century. He heard his ribs crack. 3 of them. Maybe 4. He couldn't tell through the shock. Then the tree itself went down, and suddenly he was pinned, buried, crushed under weight that made breathing feel like trying to inhale through a straw someone was stepping on. Darkness. Pressure. The taste of dirt in his mouth. He thought about his father, who died in a mine collapse in Pennsylvania when Elias was 12. Wondered if this was what it felt like. Wondered if the old man had time to think anything at all, or if it just ended. His vision was going gray at the edges, each breath smaller than the last. This is it, he thought. This is how it ends. And then, voices, distant at first, muffled by all that earth and broken wood. He couldn't make out words, just the fact of them. Human sounds in a place that had just tried to erase him. Here! A woman's voice, sharp, urgent. I see his hand! More voices, grunting, the sound of debris being moved. Someone was digging. It's too heavy. Different voice. Older, maybe. Strained. We can't. We can. The first voice again, closer now, fierce. Get your hands under that log. When I say lift, you lift like your life depends on it. Lena, you can't. Now. A shift. The crushing weight on Elias's chest eased just slightly. Just enough. Air rushed into his lungs. Muddy, dust-choked, but air. Again. The same woman. The one called Lena. Don't you dare stop again. They lifted. He felt himself being dragged backward, pulled from the grave the mountain had dug for him. Hands gripping his arms, his shoulders. Strong hands, relentless, light, sky. The shock of open air after being buried. Elias gasped, coughed, tasted blood. His vision swam. 3 figures stood over him, silhouetted against the afternoon sun. 3 women, all breathing hard, covered in mud and sweat. The one in the middle was large. Not just tall, but heavy. Built like someone who'd spent a lifetime doing work that broke smaller people. Her face was flushed red from exertion, her dark hair coming loose from the braid she'd tied it in. Her hands were bleeding. She looked down at him with eyes that held something he couldn't quite name. Not pity, not even relief. Something harder than that. You're alive, she said. Simple statement. Then she turned to the others. We need to get him down the mountain before dark. Lena, one of the others started. I know. The large woman, Lena, wiped her hands on her skirt. I know we weren't supposed to be up here. I know what they'll say. But he's alive, and that's what matters right now. They fashioned a litter from broken branches and someone's shawl. The whole time they worked, Elias drifted in and out, his broken ribs screaming every time they moved him. He caught fragments of conversation. Town's going to have opinions. Let them. Your husband. He's not my anything. The journey down took hours, or maybe minutes. Time had gone strange. All Elias knew was pain and the jarring rhythm of being carried over rough ground. And sometimes the voice of that woman, Lena, telling him to hold on, stay with them, don't you dare die after we work this hard. When he woke again, he was inside somewhere. A cottage, small and worn but clean. Late afternoon light filtered through a window with curtains that had been mended more times than replaced. He was on a bed, narrow, with blankets that smelled like wood smoke and lavender. His chest was wrapped tight. Bandages, he realized. Someone who knew what they were doing had set his ribs. You're awake. The older voice from before. A woman in her 50s sat in a chair by the window, knitting something. Gray hair pulled back severe, face lined with the kind of weathering that came from decades of hard living. Good. Wasn't sure you'd make it. Elias tried to speak. His throat was raw. Don't. She set the knitting aside. Your ribs are broken. 3 of them. You've got a concussion. Various cuts and bruises. You're lucky to be breathing at all. Who? He managed. Ruth Calder. This is my cottage. Well, mine and Martha's and Lena's. She poured water from a pitcher into a tin cup, held it to his lips. Drink slow. The water was cold, clean. It hurt going down, but he didn't care. The woman, he rasped. The one who… Lena. She's the one who spotted you, insisted we dig you out. Ruth's expression was unreadable. Against my better judgment, I should add. We're not exactly popular in town as it is. Why? Ruth smiled, but there was no humor in it. Why do you think? 3 unmarried women living together? Well, 2 unmarried and 1 who might as well be. People talk. The door opened. 2 more women entered, one tall and angular with shoulders like she'd spent her life swinging an axe. The other, the large woman from the mountain. Lena. He's awake, the tall one said. Good. She moved with the kind of deliberate economy that suggested military training or years of hard manual labor. Maybe both. I'm Martha Hale. You're in my bed, by the way. Don't get comfortable. Martha, Ruth warned. What? Man should know where he stands. But Martha's eyes weren't unkind, just direct. You feel like you're dying? Yes. Then you're healing. The dying feeling means you're alive enough to hurt. She pulled up a stool, sat down with a creak. What were you doing up on that ridge in the first place? Everyone knows that section's been unstable since the spring melt. I own it, Elias said. The land. My cabin's up there. Was up there. The 3 women exchanged looks. You're the one they've been talking about, Ruth said slowly. Elias Vance, the hermit who bought that old mining claim. I'm not a hermit. I just like my privacy. Well, your privacy just tried to kill you. Martha stood, went to the stove in the corner. You want coffee? It's terrible, but it's hot. Please. While Martha poured, Lena moved closer. She hadn't said anything since entering, just watched him with those same hard eyes. Thank you, Elias said to her, for digging me out. She shrugged, massive shoulders lifting and falling. Couldn't just leave you there. Most people would have. I'm not most people. She said it flat, like stating a fact. Then, quieter. And I know what it's like to be buried by something you can't fight. Ruth shot her a look. Lena ignored it. Martha returned with the coffee. It was, as advertised, terrible. Elias drank it anyway. So, Martha said. What now? You can't go back up there. The whole section's probably gone. And even if it's not, you're in no condition to be living alone in the wilderness. I'll manage. You'll die is what you'll do. Ruth set her knitting aside with more force than necessary. Don't be stupid. You can barely sit up. I can't stay here. Why not? Lena spoke up. You got somewhere better to be? Elias looked at her. Really looked. She met his gaze without flinching, without the self-consciousness he'd seen in most people her size. There was something defiant in the set of her jaw. I don't want to be a burden, he said. Then don't be. Martha drained her own coffee. Earn your keep. Once you're healed up, there's work needs doing. Roof's got holes. Fence is falling down. You look like you know which end of a hammer to hold. And if I say no, then you leave. Martha shrugged. But you won't make it 50 yards in your condition. So you might as well save everyone the trouble and stay put. That night, Elias lay awake listening to the sounds of the cottage settling. Low voices from the other room, too quiet to make out words. Somewhere outside, an owl called. His ribs throbbed with every breath. The pain kept him present, kept him from slipping into the dark spaces his mind wanted to go. He'd come to Colorado to get away from people, from expectations, from the weight of a world that wanted him to be something he wasn't. And now here he was, dependent on 3 women he didn't know, in a town that apparently had opinions about them. The irony wasn't lost on him. 3 days passed before he could stand without help. A week before he could walk outside without feeling like his chest was being crushed all over again. The cottage was small. 2 rooms and a loft built solid but showing its age in 100 small ways. Ruth and Martha shared the loft. Lena had a corner of the main room behind a curtain that gave the illusion of privacy. They all worked. Ruth took in mending and sewing from town, her fingers quick and precise despite their age. Martha did carpentry and occasional blacksmith work, strong enough to wrestle iron into submission. Lena did whatever needed doing, hauling water, chopping wood, heavy lifting that would break most men. And they were careful around each other. Polite, like people who'd agreed to share space but hadn't quite figured out how to share lives. Elias noticed it in the way conversations would stop when one of them entered a room, the way they each kept to their own tasks, their own territories within the small cottage. "How long have you lived together?" he asked Ruth one afternoon while she was teaching him how to darn his own socks. 5 months, since Lena arrived. Ruth's needle moved with mechanical precision. Martha and I had been here 2 years before that. And Lena came from... That's her story to tell, if she wants to. Ruth nodded off a thread with more force than necessary. Just like whatever you're running from is yours. I'm not running from anything. Ruth looked at him over her spectacles. Everyone who ends up this far from everywhere is running from something. The question is whether you're running towards something better or just running. Before Elias could answer, the door burst open. Lena stood there, breathing hard, her face flushed. Not from exertion this time. From anger. "They're here," she said. "The railway men. 4 of them, asking questions in town about land claims." Martha appeared from the workshop she'd set up in the lean-to. "What kind of questions?" "The kind that come before they try to take something." Lena's hands were shaking. She clenched them into fists. "They were asking about Elias, about his claim, about whether he had proof." Elias felt ice in his stomach. "My deed. It was in the cabin. The buried cabin." "Yes." The 4 of them stood there, understanding settling over them like snow. "Could be they don't know it's buried," Martha said slowly. "Could be they're just fishing. Or could be they know exactly what happened and figure you're dead or too broken to fight." Ruth set aside her mending. "Either way, if you don't have that deed, they'll claim the land was never properly transferred," Elias finished. "They'll say I was squatting, and with the railway expansion, they'll take it." Lena's voice was flat. "Just like they take everything else." There was something in the way she said it that made Elias look at her closer. Something bitter and knowing. "We have to go back up there," he said. "Get the deed before they do." "You can barely walk," Ruth pointed out. "Then I'll crawl if I have to. That land is all I have. I'm not letting them steal it." "It's too dangerous," Martha said. "The whole section's unstable. Could come down again any time. So we'll be careful." "We?" Lena raised an eyebrow. "I can't do it alone. Not in my condition." Elias met her eyes. "You pulled me out once. I'm asking you to help me pull out what's left of my life." Silence. The cottage felt too small suddenly, like the walls were pressing in. "This is stupid," Martha said, but she was already moving toward her tool bench, gathering rope and shovels. "Completely idiotic," Ruth agreed. She went to a trunk in the corner, started pulling out warmer clothes. Lena just looked at him, that same hard, appraising look from before. "Why?" she asked. "Why does this land matter so much? It nearly killed you." "Because it's mine," Elias said simply, "and I'm tired of letting other people decide what I get to keep." Something shifted in Lena's expression. Not quite a smile, more like recognition. "All right," she said, "but we do this smart. And if it looks like the mountain's going to come down again, we run. No heroics." "Deal." They left at first light, 4 of them moving through the pre-dawn gray like ghosts. The trail up to Elias's claim was treacherous, even in good conditions. Now, with half the mountainside rearranged, it was barely a trail at all. Elias's ribs screamed with every step. He bit down on the pain, focused on putting one foot in front of the other. Martha led, picking out the safest route with the eye of someone who understood how earth and stone wanted to move. Ruth followed, surprisingly nimble for her age. Then Elias. Lena brought up the rear, carrying most of the tools. They didn't talk. Sound carried strange in mountains, and the last thing they needed was to set off another slide. When they reached the site where Elias's cabin had stood, the devastation was worse than he remembered. The entire structure was gone, not just collapsed, but erased, swallowed by thousands of cubic yards of debris. Only the stone chimney remained, jutting up from the wreckage like a broken tooth. "Where was the deed?" Martha asked quietly. "Inside, in a lockbox under the floorboards." Elias pointed to where he thought the southeast corner had been. "About there. Maybe." Lena set down the tools, studied the debris field. "We'll need to work in shifts. 2 digging, 2 watching for movement." "Watching for what?" "Signs the mountain's not done yet." She handed him a shovel. "You see any of us signal, you drop everything and run downhill. Don't stop. Don't look back. Understand?" They understood. The work was brutal. Every shovelful of mud and broken wood felt like it weighed twice what it should. The sun climbed, turned the debris field into an oven. Sweat mixed with dirt until they were all caked in mud. Elias lasted maybe 20 minutes before his ribs forced him to stop. He sat on a boulder, breathing carefully, while the women kept working. And he watched Lena. She moved like someone who'd been doing heavy labor her entire life. No wasted motion, no complaining, just steady, relentless work. Lift, throw, lift, throw. Her breathing never seemed to change. Martha had to stop and rest. Ruth needed water, her hands cramping, but Lena just kept going. "You should rest," Elias called to her. "I'm fine. You've been digging for an hour straight. I said I'm fine." She didn't look up, just kept moving debris. There was something almost violent in the way she worked, like she was trying to prove something, or maybe trying to bury something else. By midday, they'd cleared maybe a third of where Elias thought the cabin floor had been. Not nearly enough, and the sun was starting to bake the mud hard, making every shovelful harder than the last. "We're not going to make it," Ruth said, sitting in the shade of the chimney. Her face was gray with exhaustion. "We'll make it." Lena drove her shovel into the debris like she was attacking it. "Lena, I said we'll make it." She heaved another load of mud. "We didn't come all the way up here to quit." "No one's quitting," Martha said carefully. "We're being realistic. There's too much debris. Even with all 4 of us, then we come back tomorrow. And the day after. However long it takes. We don't have that kind of time." Elias hauled himself to his feet. "If the railway men are already asking questions, they'll send surveyors up here within a week, maybe less. So we work faster." "Lena." Ruth's voice was gentle but firm. "You can't fight gravity with stubbornness." Lena's shovel hit something solid. The sound rang out clear and sharp. Everyone froze. She dropped to her knees, started scraping away mud with her bare hands. "Here, there's something here." They all moved at once. Within minutes, they'd uncovered a section of floorboard, partially crushed, but intact. And beneath it, the lockbox, Elias breathed. It was dented, caked in mud, but closed. The lock was still engaged. Martha pried it loose while Elias fumbled for the key he'd kept on a chain around his neck. His hands were shaking so badly he couldn't get it into the lock. Lena took it from him. Her hands were steady. The lock clicked. The box opened. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, was the deed to Elias's land. 64 acres of mountain and forest, legally transferred to him 3 years ago. Proof of ownership. "Thank Christ," Ruth muttered. They were so focused on the deed that they almost didn't hear it, the low groan from somewhere above them. That same sound from before, the mountain shifting. "Run," Martha said quietly, then louder. "Run!" They scrambled down the slope, half running, half sliding. Behind them, another section of the mountain let go. Not as massive as before, but big enough. The ground shook, trees cracked and fell. Elias's ribs were on fire, but he didn't stop. Couldn't stop. He followed Lena's back as she plowed downward, her momentum carrying her forward even as the ground tried to give way beneath them. They made it to stable ground just as the second slide hit where they'd been digging. Tons of earth and debris poured down, burying the site all over again. For a long moment, nobody spoke. They just stood there, breathing hard, covered in mud, alive. "Well," Martha said eventually, "that was exciting." Ruth started laughing, just a little at first, then harder, the kind of laughter that came from surviving something you shouldn't have. Even Lena smiled. A small thing, gone almost before Elias saw it. They made their way back to the cottage as the sun set, exhausted and battered, but victorious. The deed was safe. Elias's claim was secure, or so they thought. The men were waiting at the cottage when they arrived, 4 of them, well dressed by local standards, sitting on horses too expensive for this country. Surveyors, railwaymen. The one in front, sharp-featured, mustached, everything about him precise and expensive, smiled when he saw them approach. "Miss Calder, Miss Hale." He tipped his hat with exaggerated courtesy. Then his eyes landed on Lena. The smile thinned. "Mrs. Griggs?" Lena's whole body went rigid. "What do you want?" Martha stepped forward, putting herself slightly between the horseman and Lena. "Just to deliver a message." The man's eyes moved to Elias. "You must be Vance. Heard you had some trouble with the mountain." "I survived." "So I see. Congratulations." The smile never reached his eyes. "I'm Clayton Pierce. I represent the Colorado Mountain Railway Company. We're expanding our line through this valley, and we've identified several parcels of land that will be needed for the right-of-way." "Let me guess," Elias said. "Mine is one of them." "Indeed. We're prepared to offer fair compensation, of course. More than fair, given the recent difficulties with the property." "Not interested." Pierce's smile finally faded. "Mr. Vance, I don't think you understand. This isn't a negotiation. The railway has been granted eminent domain by the territorial government. We're extending you the courtesy of a voluntary sale, but with or without your cooperation, that land will be ours." "You can't just take someone's property," Ruth said. "Actually, we can. It's all quite legal. Progress requires sacrifice, Miss Calder. Surely you understand that." "What I understand is that you're a thief in a fancy suit." Pierce's expression hardened. "Be careful, Miss Calder. You and your household already have a certain reputation in town. It would be unfortunate if that reputation made it difficult for you to do business." "Is that a threat?" "It's a reality." Pierce gathered his reins. "Mr. Vance, you have 1 week to accept our offer. After that, we'll proceed through legal channels, and the price will be considerably lower. I suggest you use the time to consider your position." He turned his horse, started to ride off, then paused, looked back at Lena. "Mrs. Griggs, your husband sends his regards. Says he'll be coming through next month to settle accounts. I'm sure you're looking forward to that." Lena said nothing, but Elias saw her hands clench into fists. The railwaymen rode away, leaving the 4 of them standing in the gathering dusk. "Well," Martha said after a long silence, "that's not good." Ruth was already moving toward the cottage. "We need to talk to a lawyer, find out exactly what rights they have." "I know what rights they have," Lena said quietly. "The same rights men like that always have. They want something, so they take it. Not this time." Elias looked down at the lockbox still clutched in his mud-covered hands. "I have the deed, legal proof. They can threaten all they want, but you think paper stops men with money and power?" Lena's voice was bitter. "You think the law protects people like us?" "It has to. It's all we have." Lena looked at him with something like pity. "Then you're about to learn a hard lesson." She walked past them into the cottage, letting the door slam behind her. That night, Elias couldn't sleep. His ribs hurt. His hands hurt. Everything hurt. But more than that, he kept hearing the certainty in Lena's voice, the knowledge that came from experience. He got up carefully, moved to the window. Outside, the moon was nearly full, painting everything silver. Lena was sitting on the porch steps, looking out at the mountains. Elias pulled on his boots, went outside. The night air was cold, clean. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked. She didn't turn. "Never sleep much." He sat down on the steps beside her, keeping a respectful distance. For a while they just sat there, two broken people looking at the same dark mountains. "Who's the husband?" Pierce mentioned, Elias finally asked. "Man named Griggs, Cowboy. Works a ranch about 60 miles west." Her voice was flat, reciting facts. "He needed a wife to help with his place. My father needed money. They made an arrangement." "You didn't have a say?" "I had a say. I said no. Didn't matter." She picked up a small stone, turned it over in her hands. "I was too much of a burden, too big, ate too much, took up too much space. Better to be useful somewhere else." "So they sold you?" "More or less. Griggs paid off my father's debts. In exchange, he got a wife. Me." She threw the stone into the darkness. "I ran before the wedding, made it here. Ruth and Martha took me in, even though they knew it would cause problems." "Does this Griggs know where you are?" "Probably. Small towns, people talk." She finally looked at him. "He'll come for me eventually, or send men to bring me back. Contract's a contract as far as the law's concerned." "That's not right." "No? It's not." She stood, brushed off her skirt. "But here's what I learned. Being right doesn't keep you safe. Being strong does. Being willing to fight does. So when those railway men come back, and they will come back, you better be ready to fight, because they won't stop just because you have a piece of paper." She went inside, leaving Elias alone with the mountains and his thoughts. She was wrong, he told himself. The law meant something. His deed was legal. The railway couldn't just take his land. But even as he thought it, he knew she was probably right. The world didn't work on paper. It worked on power. And he had so little of that. The week passed in a strange kind of waiting. They all went about their routines, Ruth sewing, Martha working metal, Lena chopping wood. But there was tension underneath everything now, like living on top of an unstable mountain, waiting for the slide. Elias got stronger. His ribs started to heal. He could walk without wincing, work without stopping every 5 minutes to breathe. And he watched the three women who'd saved him, really watched them, and started to understand the careful balance they'd struck. Ruth with her sharp mind and sharper tongue, managing the household finances, dealing with the merchants in town who'd still do business with them. Martha with her strength and skill, earning money through labor that didn't require being respectable. And Lena, doing the hardest work, the heaviest lifting, asking for nothing, taking up space like she was always ready to apologize for existing. On the 6th day, Elias went into town. The lawyer's office was above the general store, accessed by an outside staircase that creaked alarmingly. The lawyer himself was young, maybe 30, with ink-stained fingers and the kind of earnest face that hadn't learned to hide disappointment yet. His name was Thomas Wright, and he listened to Elias's story with increasing concern. "They're claiming eminent domain?" Wright asked when Elias finished. "That's what Pierce said." "Did he show you any documentation? Legal authorization from the territorial government?" "No, just said it was all legal." Wright leaned back in his chair, which creaked almost as badly as the stairs. "Mr. Vance, eminent domain is real. The government can seize property for public use, roads, railways, that sort of thing. But there's a process. Public notice, fair compensation, legal proceedings." He tapped his desk. "If the railway is claiming authorization they haven't shown you, that's concerning. So I can fight this. Possibly, if you have clear title to the land, which you say you do, then they can't just take it without following proper procedures." Wright hesitated. "But I have to be honest with you. Fighting a railway company is expensive. They have lawyers, good ones. They can drag proceedings out for years if they want to." "I don't have years. Most people don't. That's how they win." Wright pulled out a sheet of paper, started writing. "Let me file a preliminary objection. Assert your title, demand to see their authorization. It'll buy you some time, at least." "How much time?" "A month, maybe 2. After that?" Wright shrugged. "After that, it depends on how dirty they want to play." Elias walked back to the cottage as the sun set, Wright's words echoing in his head. A month, maybe 2, and then what? He found all 3 women on the porch, Martha fixing a broken hinge, Ruth mending a shirt, Lena sharpening an axe blade. "Well?" Martha asked without looking up from her work. "The lawyer says we can fight, for a while." "And then?" "Then it depends on how dirty they want to play." Lena tested the axe blade with her thumb. They'll play dirty. Men like that always do. That night, for the first time since he'd arrived, the four of them ate dinner together. Not just in the same room, but at the same table. Ruth made stew from a rabbit Martha had trapped. Lena had baked bread, dense, hearty stuff that filled your stomach. They didn't talk much, but it felt different than before. Less like four people sharing space and more like something else. Something that didn't have a name yet. After dinner, while they were cleaning up, Elias said, "Thank you, all of you, for everything." "Don't thank us yet," Ruth said. "This isn't over." "I know, but still, you didn't have to help me. You did anyway." Martha looked at him with those direct eyes. "You were buried. We dug you out. Seems pretty simple to me." "It's not simple," Elias insisted. "You took a risk, all of you, for a stranger." "Maybe we're tired of leaving people buried," Lena said quietly. And there it was, the thing underneath everything. These three women, all of them carrying their own weight, their own pain, had pulled him out of a grave because they knew what it was like to need saving and have nobody come. The 8th day arrived. No word from the railway. No sign of Pierce and his men. "Maybe they backed off," Ruth suggested over breakfast. "Maybe," Martha said, but she didn't sound convinced. Lena said nothing, just sharpened her knives. The answer came at noon. Elias was helping Martha repair the fence when he smelled smoke. Wrong kind of smoke. Not wood stove. Not controlled burn. Something bigger. They both looked up at the same time. Black smoke was rising from behind the barn. They ran. Ruth came out of the cottage. Lena appeared from the woodshed. The barn was on fire. Not the whole thing yet, but it would be. Flames had already caught the hay stored in the loft. "The animals!" Ruth shouted. They had 2 goats and a cow in there. Martha was already running for the door, Lena right behind her. Elias grabbed buckets, started hauling water from the well. His ribs screamed, but he ignored them. Martha got the door open. Smoke poured out. The goats bolted immediately, eyes white with panic. The cow was harder, terrified, making that awful lowing sound cattle make when they know something's wrong. Lena went in after her. "Lena, no!" Ruth grabbed for her but missed. Smoke swallowed Lena whole. For a heartbeat, Elias couldn't see anything but flames and black clouds. Then she emerged, dragging the cow by its halter, her face blackened with soot, coughing hard enough to crack ribs. The cow bolted as soon as they were clear. Lena collapsed to her knees, still coughing. They fought the fire for an hour. The whole town could probably see the smoke, but nobody came to help. They fought it alone, 4 people against flames that wanted to take everything. They saved the barn. Barely. The loft was gone and half the roof, but the structure stood. Afterward, they sat in the mud and ash, too tired to move. "Accident?" Martha asked, knowing the answer. "No," Elias said. He'd found it while they were fighting the blaze, a kerosene-soaked rag near where the fire started. Message. Lena wiped soot from her face, leaving clean streaks through the black. "Told you they'd play dirty." "We call the sheriff," Ruth said. "Report this." "And tell him what?" Lena's laugh was bitter. "That someone we can't identify set a fire we can't prove was deliberate, while the sheriff gets half his campaign funds from the railway? So we do nothing? No." Elias stood, his whole body protesting. "We fight. We document everything. We make it as hard and as public and as expensive for them as we possibly can." "That's a good way to get hurt worse than a barn fire," Martha warned. "Probably," Elias agreed. "But I'm done running, done letting people take what's mine because it's easier than fighting." He looked at each of them. Ruth with her sharp mind, Martha with her unshakable strength, Lena with her quiet, relentless will. "I understand if you want out. This is my fight, not yours. But if you're willing to stand with me—" "Oh, shut up," Martha said. "Of course we're standing with you. You think we let just anyone sleep in our cottage?" Ruth was already moving toward the house. "I'll write everything down. Date, time, what we found, start a record." Lena just looked at him with those hard eyes. Then nodded. Once. And Elias understood something had shifted. They weren't 4 separate people sharing space anymore. They were something else now. Something the railway hadn't accounted for. Something that wouldn't break as easily as they thought. The mountain had tried to bury him once. The railway was trying to bury him now. But he'd been pulled out of one grave already. He wasn't going back into another. Not without one hell of a fight. The sheriff came 3 days after the fire, not because he wanted to, that much was clear from the way he sat his horse, like a man fulfilling an obligation he resented. Sheriff Donald Moss was 50-something, with the kind of belly that spoke to too many free meals from people who wanted favors. His badge caught the morning light as he dismounted, taking his time about it. "Heard you had some trouble," he said, not quite looking at any of them. "Arson," Martha said flatly. "Someone torched our barn." "That's so." Moss walked around the damaged structure, hands clasped behind his back like he was inspecting livestock at a fair. "Looks like it could have been an accident. Hay catches easy. Lantern gets knocked over. We found kerosene rags," Elias interrupted, "deliberately placed. Did you now? Where are they?" "Burned up in the fire." Moss smiled. "Not friendly." "Well then, convenient." "Convenient for who?" Ruth's voice was sharp enough to cut. "For whoever might want to make accusations they can't prove." Moss finally looked at them directly. "I'm not saying you're lying, Miss Calder. I'm saying that without evidence, there's nothing I can do. Could have been vandals. Could have been hobos passing through. Could have been, like I said, an accident." "It wasn't an accident," Lena said quietly. Moss's eyes slid to her and something changed in his expression. Not quite contempt, more like distaste, like he'd bitten into fruit and found it rotten. "Mrs. Griggs, I heard you were still in these parts. Your husband know where you are." "That's not relevant to—" "Sure it is. Man has a right to know where his wife's gotten to, especially when she's living in questionable circumstances." He looked at the cottage, at the four of them. Might be he'd want to come collect what's his. The threat hung in the air like smoke. "Is there anything else, Sheriff?" Ruth asked coldly. "Just this." Moss moved toward his horse. "Whatever dispute you folks have with the railway company, I suggest you settle it peaceful. This valley doesn't need trouble, and people who make trouble—" He swung into the saddle with a grunt. "Well, they tend to find life gets harder than it needs to be." He rode off without waiting for a response. Martha spat in the dirt. "Useless bastard." "Worse than useless," Ruth said. "He's on their side." Elias watched the sheriff disappear down the trail. "So we're on our own." "We were always on our own," Lena said. She picked up an axe, headed for the woodpile. "Might as well get used to it." The next 2 weeks settled into a pattern of waiting and watching. They reinforced the barn, salvaged what they could. Elias helped where his healing ribs allowed. The work was good. It gave him something to focus on besides the legal papers Thomas Wright kept sending. The railway's claim was more complicated than they'd thought. Pierce wasn't just threatening eminent domain. He'd filed a challenge to Elias's original deed, claiming the land transfer had never been properly recorded with the territorial office. "Is it true?" Martha asked when Wright came out to explain it in person. The young lawyer looked uncomfortable. "The recording is incomplete. The previous owner died before the paperwork was fully processed. Technically, Mr. Vance's claim could be challenged. But I have the deed," Elias said, "signed and witnessed. Which helps, but if they can prove the recording was defective—" Wright spread his hands helplessly. "Colorado land law is a mess right now. Half these claims are disputed. The courts are backed up for years." "So what do? We file a motion to validate the original transfer. I'll need to track down witnesses who were present at the sale, anyone who can testify to the intent of the parties involved." Wright closed his folder. "It'll take time and money." "How much money?" Wright named a figure that made even Ruth wince. After he left, they sat around the table in silence. The number hung over them like a sentence. "I don't have that kind of money," Elias finally said. "None of us do," Ruth agreed. "Could we borrow it?" Martha asked. "From the bank in town?" Ruth's laugh was bitter. "The bank that gets its operating capital from railway investors? That bank? There has to be something we can do." "There is," Lena said. She'd been quiet through the whole conversation, just listening. Now she stood, went to a shelf, pulled down a tin box. "We use this." She opened it. Inside was money. Not a fortune, but more than Elias had expected. Bills and coins, carefully counted and stacked. "Lena, that's—" Ruth started. "My running money." What I've been saving since I got here. Lena set the box on the table. It's not enough by itself, but combined with whatever else we have. That's yours, Elias said. You've been saving it to start over somewhere. I can't. You can and you will. Lena's voice left no room for argument. Because if they take your land, what do you think happens next? They won't stop there. They'll keep pushing, keep taking, and eventually they'll decide this cottage is in their way too. She's right, Martha said slowly. This isn't just about Elias's claim anymore. It's about whether we let them roll over us or we stand up. Ruth was already moving toward her own hiding place, a loose board in the loft. I've got some put away. Not much, but wait. Elias held up his hands. You're all talking about spending your savings, your security, on a fight that might not even work. That's insane. Probably, Martha agreed, but we're doing it anyway. Why? The question hung there. Lena looked at Ruth. Ruth looked at Martha. Martha looked at all of them. Because, Ruth said finally, we're tired of running. All of us. We're tired of being pushed around by men who think they own the world. We're tired of being told we don't matter. And because, Martha added, you dug yourself out of a grave to keep what's yours. Seems only fair we help you keep it. Lena just nodded, like it was obvious, like there was no other choice. Elias felt something crack open in his chest. Not pain this time. Something else. All right, he said quietly. But we do this together. Equal shares in whatever happens. Win or lose. Win or lose, they echoed. They pooled their money that night, counted it twice. It was enough to pay right for the next phase of legal work. Maybe enough for one more phase after that, if they were careful. If they were lucky. Thomas Wright took the case with the kind of grim determination that suggested he knew it was probably hopeless, but was too stubborn to admit it. He filed motions, tracked down witnesses, built a paper trail that proved Elias's purchase had been legitimate, even if the recording was sloppy. The railway responded by filing their own motions, challenging every document, demanding depositions, dragging the whole process into a swamp of legal minutiae designed to exhaust and bankrupt anyone without deep pockets. Summer turned to fall. The aspens went gold, then bare. The first snow came early, dusting the peaks white, and through it all, they worked. Elias helped Martha with carpentry jobs in town, the ones she could get from people who didn't care about reputations. Ruth's sewing business picked up when several ranch wives needed winter clothes altered. Lena took work at the sawmill, hauling lumber that would have broken most men. They never talked about it, but they all knew every dollar they earned was a dollar that could go toward legal fees, toward survival, toward not breaking. The town noticed. Of course the town noticed. 3 unmarried women and a man living under one roof, fighting the railway, refusing to do the sensible thing and just sell. The whispers got louder. Elias heard them when he went to buy supplies, saw them in the way merchants wouldn't quite meet his eyes, felt them in the silence that fell when he entered the general store. Don't let it get to you, Martha told him one evening. People always talk. Gives them something to do besides face their own cowardice. But it did get to him. Not because he cared what they thought, but because he cared what it did to the women who'd saved him. Ruth lost customers. 3 of her regular clients quietly took their business elsewhere, citing vague concerns about propriety. Martha got turned away from 2 jobs, told the positions had been filled even though the help wanted signs stayed up. And Lena bore it like she bore everything else. Silent, steady, working twice as hard as anyone else, like she could prove her worth through sheer labor. It's not fair, Elias told her one night when they were both too restless to sleep, sitting on the porch watching frost form on the ground. Fair's got nothing to do with anything. Lena was whittling something, a piece of pine, slowly taking shape into a bird. World works the way it works. You can cry about it, or you can deal with it. Which one are you doing? Her knife paused. Both. Just not where anyone can see. She went back to whittling. Elias watched her hands, scarred, calloused, but precise, gentle, despite their strength. Why'd you really help me? He asked. That day on the mountain. You could have left me buried. Would have been safer for you. Safer's overrated. That's not an answer. Lena was quiet for a long time. Her knife shaved careful curls of wood into the darkness. You ever feel like you're suffocating? She finally said. Like the whole world is just pressing down on you, crushing you, and everyone expects you to just take it, just keep breathing shallow and pretend it's fine. Yes, that's what my whole life was. My father saying I was too expensive to feed, other girls making sure I knew I was too big to be pretty, men looking at me like I was either a joke or a work animal, then Griggs treating me like property he'd purchased. She tested the edge of her knife against her thumb. When I saw you buried under all that earth, fighting to breathe, I don't know, it felt like I was looking at myself, and I thought, if I can dig him out, maybe I can dig myself out too. You did dig yourself out. You ran. You got away. Did I? Lena gestured at the dark mountains. I'm still hiding. Still waiting for Griggs to come collect his investment. Still living like I don't deserve to take up space. She looked at him. But fighting for your land, standing up to the railway, to the town, to all of it, that feels different. That feels like actually being free instead of just running. Elias understood. He had come to Colorado for the same reason, trying to escape everything he'd been expected to be in Pennsylvania. His father's death in the mines, his mother's disappointment when he wouldn't follow into that same darkness, the weight of other people's plans for his life. We're both running, he said. We're running, Lena corrected. Now we're standing still, fighting instead of fleeing. Think it'll work? She smiled, rare enough that it startled him. Probably not, but at least we'll lose on our feet instead of on our knees. The first court hearing was set for late October. Wright prepared them as best he could, but his confidence was thin. Pierce will have good lawyers, he warned the night before. They'll try to rattle you, make you look unstable, unreliable, especially you ladies. They'll use every prejudice they can. Let them try, Martha said. The courtroom was smaller than Elias expected, wood-paneled, smelling of old paper and tobacco. The judge was a gray-haired man named Thornton who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. The railway's lawyers were exactly what Wright had predicted. 3 men in expensive suits, every word precise and calculated. They presented their case with the kind of casual confidence that came from winning most of the time. Elias's deed was defective. The previous owner's death had invalidated the transfer. The land rightfully belonged to the estate, which had since been dissolved, which meant it reverted to territorial control, which meant the railway's claim through eminent domain was valid. It was all very neat, very legal, very designed to make resistance seem pointless. Then Wright presented their evidence, witnesses who'd been at the original sale, documentation of payment, letters from the previous owner stating his intent to sell. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Your Honor, Wright said, the railway is trying to use a technicality to steal land from a man who purchased it in good faith. Mr. Vance has occupied and improved this property for 3 years. He's paid taxes on it. He's met every requirement of ownership except for a recording error that wasn't his fault. Pierce's lead lawyer, a sharp-faced man named Dalton, stood smoothly. The law is made of technicalities, Your Honor. If we ignore them when they're inconvenient, we have no law at all. Judge Thornton looked tired. I'll take this under advisement. Ruling in 2 weeks. Outside the courthouse, they gathered in the cold afternoon air. How do you think it went? Ruth asked. Wright shrugged. Honestly, I have no idea. Thornton's hard to read. But we have a chance? We have a chance. It wasn't much, but it was something. They rode back to the cottage in Martha's wagon, none of them talking much. The mountains were already snow-capped, winter coming on fast. That night, Lena made stew, rabbit and venison and vegetables from Ruth's garden. They ate together, all of them around the table that was too small but felt right anyway. Whatever happens, Ruth said, raising her tin cup, we fought. We fought, they echoed. The 2 weeks waiting for the ruling were harder than the hearing itself. Every day felt stretched thin, like tension wire ready to snap. They tried to keep busy. Elias and Martha insulated the barn against winter. Ruth started a quilt, something to keep her hands occupied. Lena split enough wood to last until spring, then split more. And they talked. Really talked, in a way they hadn't before. Ruth told them about her husband, dead 15 years, and how his family had taken everything after the funeral, leaving her with nothing. How she'd wandered from town to town, sewing and mending until she'd found this cottage abandoned and decided to squat. Martha talked about the war She'd followed her brother to fight, disguised as a man, until she took shrapnel in her leg and got discovered. Dishonorably discharged. Her family disowned her. So she'd gone west, where nobody knew her story. And Lena, slowly, haltingly, talked about growing up the largest child in a family that could barely feed itself. How she'd always been the one sent to do the heaviest work, the dirtiest jobs. How when Griggs's offer came, her father had presented it like he was doing her a favor. "You'll have a home," he'd said, "a husband, security. What more do you want?" What she'd wanted was to matter for something besides how much weight she could carry. Elias told them about the mines, about watching his father's lungs slowly fill with coal dust and blood, about the cage lowering men into darkness every morning and bringing back fewer bodies than it should, about the day he'd refused to go down and his mother's face when he told her he was leaving. "She said I was a coward," he said, "running from honest work." "You were running towards something better," Ruth said firmly. "There's no shame in that." "Isn't there?" "No. The shame's on the people who want to bury you, literally or otherwise, for their own profit." The ruling came on a Wednesday. Wright rode out personally to deliver the news. His face told them before his words did. "We won," he said. "Preliminary ruling. Thornton validated your deed, said the recording error wasn't sufficient to invalidate a legitimate purchase." For a moment, nobody moved. Then Ruth let out a whoop that could have woken the dead. Martha grabbed Elias in a hug that would have broken his ribs if they weren't mostly healed. Lena just smiled, that rare, real smile that made her look 10 years younger. "What happens now?" Elias asked when the celebration calmed down. Wright's smile faded slightly. "Now the railway appeals. They'll take it to the Territorial Supreme Court. That'll take months, maybe a year." "Can we win there too?" "Maybe. Thornton's ruling gives us a strong foundation. But—" Wright hesitated. "The Supreme Court judges are appointed by the territorial governor, and the governor is very friendly with railway interests." The joy dimmed, not extinguished, but shadowed. "So we just keep fighting," Martha said. "We keep fighting," Wright agreed. That night they celebrated anyway. Martha broke out a bottle of whiskey she'd been saving. Ruth made honey cakes. They ate and drank, and for a few hours, they let themselves pretend this was the end instead of just another beginning. Elias sat back, watching the three women who'd become his family, though none of them had used that word yet, and felt something he hadn't felt in years, hope maybe. Or just the absence of that crushing weight, the feeling that maybe, just maybe, the world didn't always win. Lena caught him watching, raised her glass. "To not being buried. To not being buried," he echoed. 3 days later, the second fire started. This time, it was the cottage itself. Middle of the night, flames already climbing the exterior wall by the time Martha woke and smelled smoke. She screamed. They all scrambled awake, grabbed what they could, Ruth's money box, Martha's tools, Lena's tin of savings. Elias's deed, thank whatever forces existed for that. They barely made it out before the roof caught. The four of them stood in the yard watching everything burn. The cottage they'd shared, Ruth's sewing machine, Martha's workshop, all of Lena's carefully carved wooden birds. She'd made dozens of them, Elias realized now, probably hundreds. All of it. Gone. The volunteer fire brigade came, but by then it was too late. The cottage was a total loss. They managed to save the barn, at least, and the animals. Sheriff Moss showed up at dawn, looking even less interested than before. "Arson again?" he asked, making it clear he didn't believe it. "Obviously," Ruth said. Her voice was hollow. "Evidence?" "It's in the ashes. Go look." Moss didn't bother. "Seems like you folks have bad luck with fires. Might want to be more careful. Or might want to investigate who keeps setting them," Martha snapped. "I'll make a note in my report." Moss touched his hat brim. "You ladies have somewhere to stay? Can't be living in a barn." "We'll manage." "See that you do. Town council's getting concerned about vagrancy." After he left, they sat in the ruins of what had been their home. Ash was still falling like snow. "They're trying to break us," Ruth said quietly. "They're succeeding," Martha replied. Elias looked at Lena. She was staring at the smoking remains of the cottage, her face unreadable. "No," she said. "They're not." "Lena, they're not," she repeated louder. This is what they do. They push until you break, until you give up and run. Well, I'm done running. She stood, brushed ash from her skirt. We rebuild, right here, on this exact spot. With what? Ruth gestured at the ashes. We just spent everything we had on legal fees. Then we earn more. We work harder. We don't stop. Lena's voice was steel. Because if we leave now, they win, and I'm done letting men like Pierce win. Martha looked at her for a long moment, then she stood too. All right. We rebuild. Ruth was slower to stand, but she stood. We rebuild. They all looked at Elias. He thought about the mountain, about being buried, about these 3 women who dug him out when they had every reason to walk away, about Lena's words, losing on your feet instead of on your knees. We rebuild, he said. They lived in the barn that winter, divided it into sections with hanging blankets, brought in a stove and enough wood to keep from freezing. It was crowded, uncomfortable. The cold seeped through every gap in the walls. But they lived, and they worked. Elias and Martha took every carpentry job they could find, even the ones that barely paid. Ruth sewed until her fingers bled, then kept sewing. Lena worked at the sawmill from dawn until dark, coming back exhausted and covered in sawdust. They saved every penny, bought lumber when they could afford it. Slowly, so slowly, began to rebuild the cottage. The town watched with something between fascination and contempt, like they couldn't decide if this was impressive or just pathetic stubbornness. People whispered, 4 of them living in a barn, working themselves to death, refusing to admit defeat. They should just leave, Elias overheard one merchant say. Railway's going to win anyway. They're just prolonging the inevitable. Maybe they were, but the alternative was surrender, and none of them could stomach that. Winter deepened. Christmas came and went. They marked it with a shared meal of beans and cornbread, too tired for celebration. New Year's passed without fanfare. January brought news. The railway's appeal had been accepted by the Territorial Supreme Court. Oral arguments scheduled for April. That's when we'll know, Wright told them, one way or another. 3 more months of working, waiting, hoping. By March, they had the cottage walls up. No roof yet, but walls. Progress you could see. Proof they hadn't broken. And something else had changed too. The careful distance they'd kept at the beginning was gone. They moved around each other with easy familiarity, shared jokes, shared silences, became something that looked less like an arrangement and more like family. The word still felt strange, but accurate. One evening in late March, Lena was teaching Elias how to whittle. His hands were clumsy compared to hers, but he was learning. You're getting better, she said, watching him shape a rough bird from a piece of pine. Still looks like a potato with wings. All birds start as potatoes. You just have to find the bird inside. They worked in comfortable quiet. Then Lena said, Griggs sent word. He's coming next month, after the court ruling. Elias's knife slipped, nearly cutting his thumb. What does he want? What do you think? He wants his property back, me. She said it flat, emotionless. Contract's still valid. Sheriff confirmed it. You can't go back to him. Might not have a choice. There's always a choice. Lena looked at him. Is there? Because it seems to me we're all trapped by choices other people made. Your father chose the mines. My father chose to sell me. The railway chose to want your land. Where's our choice in any of that? The choice is what we do next. Elias set down his half-carved bird. We chose to fight, to rebuild, to not let them break us. And if fighting isn't enough, then at least we tried. Lena went back to her whittling, but he saw her hands shake slightly. Just once, then steady again. April arrived with mud and rain. The oral arguments were scheduled for the 15th. Wright traveled to the territorial capital to present their case. He returned a week later, exhausted and grim. The judges asked hard questions, he reported, challenged every piece of our evidence. Dalton and his team were prepared for everything. He rubbed his eyes. I did my best. When do we hear? Ruth asked. Could be weeks, could be months. They'll rule when they rule. More waiting, more working. The cottage roof went on. They moved back inside, barely finished, still smelling of new wood and paint, but theirs. And then, on a Tuesday in late April, 4 men rode up to the cottage. Not railway men this time. Griggs had come for his wife. He was bigger than Elias had imagined. Not tall, but wide through the shoulders and chest, built like someone who'd spent his life wrestling cattle and breaking horses. Griggs sat his mount like he owned not just the horse, but everything the animal stood on. The 3 men with him looked like ranch hands, hard-eyed, weathered, the kind who did what they were told without asking questions. Lena had been splitting wood when they arrived. She froze mid-swing, the axe suspended above her head, then slowly lowered it. Griggs dismounted, took his time about it, like he had all day. His eyes swept over the rebuilt cottage, the barn, then settled on Lena. "There you are," he said. Not angry, almost conversational. "Been looking for you." Martha and Ruth came out of the cottage. Elias was already moving from the barn, his hammer still in his hand. "Mr. Griggs," Lena said. Her voice was steady, but Elias could see her knuckles white on the axe handle. "That's all you got to say? After running off like you did?" Griggs shook his head, more disappointed than furious. "Your daddy's real upset. Took his money in good faith. Expected a wife in return. Instead, you disappeared." "I didn't want to marry you." "Want's got nothing to do with a contract." Griggs pulled a folded paper from his coat pocket. "Got the agreement right here. Signed by your father, signed by me. Witnessed legal and proper. You're my wife, whether you like it or not. We never had a ceremony. Don't need one in the territories. Contract's binding as any church words." He tucked the paper back. "Now I've been patient, given you time to come to your senses, but that time's done. You're coming home." "This is home." Griggs's expression hardened slightly. "This? You're living in a barn with—" He looked at Elias, at Martha, at Ruth. Something ugly crossed his face. "With these people. Doing work that ain't fit for a woman. Making yourself a scandal." "Better a scandal than your property." "You are my property." He said it simple, like stating a fact. "Paid good money for you, and I'm collecting what's mine." Elias stepped forward. "She doesn't want to go." Griggs looked at him properly for the first time. "And you are?" "Someone telling you she's not going anywhere." "That's so?" Griggs smiled, not friendly. "You her man now? That what this is?" "He's my friend," Lena said quickly. "Friend." Griggs drew the word out, making it sound dirty. "Well, friend, you got no say in this. This is between me and my wife." "She's not your wife," Martha said. "Contract or not, she never married you. Never agreed to anything. Her daddy agreed for her. That's how it works." "Not anymore, it doesn't." Griggs's patience was fraying. Elias could see it in the way his jaw tightened. "I'm trying to be civilized about this, but I rode 60 miles to collect what's mine, and I ain't leaving without her." "Then you're not leaving," Ruth said coldly. One of the ranch hands shifted, his hand moving toward something on his belt. Martha saw it too. She'd gone still in that dangerous way that meant she was ready to move fast. "You really want to do this?" Griggs asked. "4 against me and my boys? Over a woman who ain't even worth the trouble she causes?" Lena flinched, just slightly, but Elias saw it. "She's worth more than you'll ever understand," he said. Griggs studied him. "You're the one with the land claim, the one fighting the railway." Understanding dawned in his eyes. "Pierce told me about you. Said you were stubborn. Said these women were helping you." He laughed, short and sharp. "This is what you're wasting your time on? Helping some fool fight a battle he can't win?" "We're fighting our own battle," Lena said quietly. "All of us. Together. Together." Griggs shook his head. "You always were simple. Thought hard work made you worth something. Thought if you just tried hard enough, people would respect you." He moved closer. Lena didn't back up, but her whole body was tense. "But you're just a big, dumb woman who's good for lifting heavy things. That's all you ever were. All you'll ever be." "That's enough," Martha said. "I'll decide when it's enough." Griggs reached for Lena's arm. She jerked back. The axe was suddenly between them, blade up. "Don't touch me." The ranch hands all moved at once. Hands to guns, to knives. Martha had somehow produced a crowbar from somewhere. Ruth had disappeared back inside, which meant she was getting something worse than a crowbar. Griggs held up a hand, stopping his men. His eyes never left Lena's face. "You're really going to threaten me, your own husband?" "You're not my husband. You never will be. The law says different. Then the law's wrong. Something changed in Griggs's expression. The pretense of civility dropped away, leaving just anger. You're coming with me. Today. Now. Whether you walk or get dragged. Try it, Martha said. See what happens. They stood there, all of them balanced on the edge of violence. One wrong move and someone was going to bleed. Then Ruth came back out of the cottage. She was carrying a shotgun. Gentlemen, she said pleasantly, I believe you were just leaving. Griggs looked at the shotgun, at Ruth's steady hands, at Martha's crowbar, and Lena's axe and Elias's hammer. This ain't over, he said. Yes, it is, Ruth replied. You came. You asked. She said no. Now you leave. That's how this works. I got a contract. And we've got witnesses who'll testify she never consented to any marriage, that she was coerced by a father in debt, that you tried to abduct her through force. Ruth's smile was sharp as broken glass. So you can ride away peaceful, or you can try to take her and we'll see which of us is still standing when the sheriff arrives. The sheriff won't do nothing. He knows the law. Maybe, but he'll have to investigate 4 dead men on my property. Might ask uncomfortable questions about why you were here in the first place. Ruth tilted her head. Your choice. Griggs's hands clenched and unclenched. Elias could see him calculating odds, weighing options. Finally, he stepped back. You're making a mistake, he said to Lena. All of you, but especially you. You could have had a home, security, a husband who'd provide for you. I'd rather starve, Lena said. Might get your wish. Griggs swung back onto his horse. When the railway takes this land and you got nowhere to go, don't come crying to me. He rode off, his men following. They didn't look back. The 4 of them stood there until the sound of hoofbeats faded completely. Then Lena's legs gave out. She sat down hard in the dirt, still holding the axe. Well, Martha said. That was interesting. Ruth set the shotgun carefully against the wall. Her hands were shaking now, aftermath of adrenaline. He'll be back. I know. Lena's voice was hollow. Not alone next time. I know. Elias sat down beside her. Didn't touch, just present. We won't let him take you. You can't stop him forever. Eventually, she looked at the axe in her hands like she wasn't sure how it got there. Eventually he'll find a way, a legal way. And then what? Then we fight that too. You can't fight everything. Watch me. Lena almost smiled. Almost. You're an idiot, you know that? So I've been told. That night they barricaded the doors, took turns on watch. Nobody slept much. Dawn came gray and cold, no sign of Griggs or his men. But 2 hours after sunrise, a rider came from town. Not Griggs. Thomas Wright. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. His clothes were rumpled, his eyes bloodshot. The ruling came, he said without preamble. They all stopped what they were doing. Elias felt his stomach drop. And? Wright dismounted slowly, like a man carrying weight. We lost. The words hung in the air. The Supreme Court overturned Thornton's decision, said the deed was invalid due to improper recording, ruled that the land belongs to the territory, which means the railway's claim through eminent domain stands. That's it? Ruth's voice was barely a whisper. All this fighting, and that's it? They're giving you 30 days to vacate. After that, Wright looked genuinely pained. After that, they'll forcibly remove you. Elias sat down on the porch steps. Felt like the mountain had buried him all over again. All that work, all that money, all that hope. Gone. Martha was the first to speak. Can we appeal? To who? The Territorial Supreme Court is the highest authority. Unless we take it federal, and that would cost... Wright shook his head. More than we could possibly raise. Thousands. Tens of thousands. So they win. Lena's voice was flat. Dead. Yes, they win. Silence. The kind that felt like suffocation. Then Ruth laughed, sharp and bitter. Of course they do. Men like Pierce always win. That's how the world works. Stupid of us to think otherwise. Ruth, Martha started. Don't. Just don't. Ruth went inside, let the door slam behind her. Wright looked miserable. I'm sorry, I really am. I thought we had a chance. Not your fault. Elias managed. "You did everything you could." After Wright left, they sat in various states of shock. Elias on the porch, Martha in the barn, Lena by the woodpile, staring at nothing. Ruth eventually came back out. She'd been crying, her eyes were red, but her voice was steady. "All right," she said. "So we lost. Now what?" "Now we leave," Martha said. "What else can we do? We can fight. We just fought. For months, we lost. So we fight different." Ruth looked at each of them. "The law failed us." "Fine, but there are other ways." "Ruth, if you're suggesting what I think you're suggesting," Martha started. "I'm suggesting we make them work for it. Make it expensive. Make it public. Make it so every person in this valley knows exactly what the railway did." "How?" "We go to the newspapers, tell our story, show them the burned barn, the burned cottage. Make Pierce answer for what he did." Elias felt something flicker. Not hope exactly, but not quite despair either. "You think that would work?" "I think it might make people uncomfortable. And uncomfortable people sometimes do the right thing just to stop feeling uncomfortable." "Or they just look away," Lena said quietly, "like they always do." "Maybe, but we have to try something." Ruth's jaw was set. "Because I am not walking away from this without making those bastards bleed a little." They talked long into the night, made plans, contacted the regional newspaper, a small operation but legitimate. The editor was skeptical at first, but Ruth was persuasive. She had a way with words when she wanted to. He agreed to send a reporter. The reporter arrived 3 days later. Young, eager, notebook already out before he'd even dismounted. His name was Samuel Chen, and he had the kind of hungry look that suggested he saw this as his chance at a real story. They told him everything: the landslide, the rescue, the deed, the fires, Griggs, the court ruling. Chen wrote it all down, asked sharp questions, took photographs of the cottage, the barn, the rebuilt walls. "This is good," he kept saying. "This is really good. People need to hear this." The article ran a week later. Front page of the regional edition, complete with photographs and Chen's breathless prose about ordinary people fighting corrupt railway interests. For 2 days, nothing happened. Then the letters started arriving. From people they'd never met. People in other towns, other valleys. People who'd fought the railway and lost. People who were fighting now. People who just wanted to say they'd read the story and it mattered. Small donations came with some of the letters. $1 here, $2 there. Not much, but something. And then a lawyer from Denver wrote. His name was Marcus Webb, and he'd been fighting railway corruption for 10 years. He'd read the article. He wanted to help. "I can't promise anything," Webb said when he visited 2 weeks later. He was older than Wright, maybe 50, with gray at his temples and eyes that had seen too many courtrooms. But there might be a path forward, a different angle. "We're listening," Elias said. Webb pulled out documents, spread them on the table. The railway's claim to eminent domain was based on their expansion plans, but those plans have to be approved by the territorial legislature. And according to my research, the approval they received was for a route 20 miles north of here. "Meaning?" Martha leaned in. "Meaning they don't actually have legal authority to take your land. They lied to the court." Ruth's eyes widened. "Can you prove that?" "I think so. The legislative records are public. It'll take time to get copies, but how much time? A few weeks? Maybe a month?" "We have 30 days to vacate," Elias said. "Then we'll need to file an emergency injunction. Stop the removal order while we investigate." Webb looked at each of them. "But I have to warn you, this is going to make them very angry. If they've been lying to the courts, exposing that could bring down their whole expansion plan. They'll fight hard." "Let them fight," Ruth said. Webb filed the injunction. The judge, a different one this time, granted a temporary stay. 60 more days while Webb investigated. Pierce's response came swift and ugly. First, he had the sawmill fire Lena. No explanation, just told her not to come back. Then 2 of Ruth's remaining clients canceled their orders. Said they'd heard concerning things about her reputation. Martha got run off a job site by men who made it clear she wasn't welcome. And someone, they never found out who, killed one of their goats. Just left it dead in the barn, throat cut. "They're trying to starve us out," Martha said, looking at the dead animal. Make it impossible to earn money. It's working, Ruth admitted. They'd counted their reserves that morning, barely enough to last another month, and that was eating nothing but beans and cornmeal. But then the letters kept coming. More people who'd read the article, more small donations, and something else, offers of work. A rancher 40 miles east needed a barn built. Would they come? A widow needed help harvesting her wheat. Could they spare someone? They took every job. Traveled for work. Came back exhausted, but with a little more money, a little more time. And Webb kept digging. He found the legislative records, found the approved route, found the discrepancy. He filed an amended complaint attaching the evidence. Sent copies to the newspapers, to the territorial governor, to anyone who might listen. The second article ran in early June. Bigger this time. The headline screamed about railway fraud, about corruption, about ordinary citizens being crushed by corporate greed. This time, the response was immediate. The Territorial Attorney General announced an investigation into the railway's land acquisition practices. The governor, facing an election year, suddenly discovered he was concerned about property rights. And Pierce's lawyers scrambled. They tried to withdraw their claim. Too late. The investigation was public now. They tried to settle, offering Elias money to drop the whole thing. He refused. "I want my land," he said. "That's all. Just what's mine." The hearing for Webb's amended complaint was set for late June. This time, the courtroom was packed. Reporters, concerned citizens, even a few territorial legislators who wanted to be seen caring about the issue. Judge Thornton presided again. He looked annoyed at being dragged back into this mess. Webb presented his evidence methodically. Legislative records, maps showing the approved route versus the route the railway claimed. Testimony from territorial officials confirming the discrepancy. Dalton and his team tried to argue it was a simple administrative error, a misunderstanding. The routes were similar, basically the same corridor. 20 miles is not basically the same, Webb said dryly. And this administrative error cost my clients their home, their savings, and nearly their lives. Thornton called a recess. Came back 2 hours later looking like a man who'd made a decision he didn't enjoy but couldn't avoid. "I'm ruling in favor of the plaintiffs," he said. "The railway's claim is invalid. The eminent domain order is vacated. Mr. Vance's deed is hereby recognized as valid and binding." The courtroom erupted. Reporters scrambled for the doors. Elias just sat there, not quite believing it. They'd won. Actually won. Outside, people wanted to congratulate them, shake their hands. Webb was already talking about next steps, making sure the ruling stuck, but Elias barely heard him. He looked at Ruth, at Martha, at Lena. They all looked as stunned as he felt. "Is it over?" Ruth finally asked. "For now," Webb said. "They could appeal again, but after this scandal, I don't think they will. Too much public attention." It wasn't until they were riding back to the cottage that it really hit them. They'd won. Against the railway, against the courts, against everyone who said they couldn't. That night they celebrated properly. Martha's whiskey came out again. Ruth made a real meal, chicken and vegetables, and bread that wasn't stale. They ate until they were full, drank until they were loose and laughing. Lena was quiet through most of it, just watching the others with that same appraising look. Elias found her later outside, looking at the mountains in the moonlight. "You all right?" he asked. "I don't know." She turned to face him. "We won. That's good. That's amazing. But Griggs is still out there. My father still sold me. The law still says I belong to a man I never married." Her voice cracked slightly. "So what did we actually win?" Elias didn't have an answer. Not a good one. "We won time," he finally said. "We won the right to keep fighting, and maybe that's all winning ever is, just getting to fight another day." That's depressing. Maybe, but it's also true. Lena looked back at the mountains. "He'll come back. Griggs. Probably with the law this time, a proper sheriff, not Moss. And then what? Then we figure it out, like we always do." "You have too much faith in us." "No," Elias said. "I have exactly the right amount of faith, because I watched you dig me out of a grave when you had every reason to walk away. I watched you stand up to Griggs with nothing but an axe. I watched you keep fighting when any sane person would have quit." He moved closer. "You're the strongest person I've ever met, and if Griggs comes back, he's going to learn what that means." Lena was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Thank you for saying that, even if it's not true. It is true. She smiled, that rare, real smile. You're still an idiot. So you keep saying. 3 days later, the Territorial Attorney General's office issued its preliminary findings. The railway company had systematically misrepresented its authorized routes to acquire land illegally. Multiple claims were being reviewed, criminal charges were being considered. Pierce resigned. The company issued a formal apology, offered to compensate everyone they'd wronged. Elias took the compensation, used it to hire workers to finish the cottage properly, to buy livestock, to start actually living instead of just surviving. And for a few weeks, things were almost peaceful. Then, on a Tuesday in late July, Griggs came back. This time he brought the territorial marshal, not Sheriff Moss, a real federal officer with the authority to enforce contracts across territorial lines. The marshal's name was Carson, and he looked uncomfortable with the whole situation. Mrs. Griggs, he said formally, I have a writ here requiring you to accompany your husband back to his residence. Lena looked at the paper he held out. Didn't take it. I'm not going. Ma'am, this is a legal contract. I understand you have objections, but I never consented. I was sold like livestock. I understand that's your position, but the contract was signed by your legal guardian at the time. That makes it binding. Carson genuinely looked pained. I'm sorry, but I have to enforce this. Like hell you do, Martha said. Carson's hand moved toward his gun. Not threatening, just ready. Please don't make this difficult. You're the one making it difficult, Ruth snapped. She doesn't want to go. That should be enough. In a perfect world, yes. But we don't live in a perfect world. We live in one with laws. The laws are wrong, Elias said. Maybe, but they're still laws. Griggs had been standing back, letting Carson do the talking. Now he stepped forward. Come on, Lena. Don't make a scene. Just come home. We can start over. I don't want to start over with you. You don't have a choice. Everyone has a choice. Not women. Not in contracts. Griggs looked at Carson. Do your job, Marshal. Carson sighed. Mrs. Griggs, I'm asking you to come peacefully. If you refuse, I'm authorized to use force. Try it, Martha said. Ma'am, I will arrest you for obstruction if... Then arrest me. Arrest all of us. See how that plays in the newspapers. Carson looked genuinely torn. This is a legal matter. The courts have spoken. The courts were wrong before, Ruth said. About the land. Maybe they're wrong about this too. That's not for me to decide. They stood there, deadlocked. Carson with his writ and his badge and his legal authority. The four of them with nothing but refusal. Then Lena did something that surprised everyone. She stepped forward. All right, I'll go. Lena, Elias started. No, it's fine. She looked at Griggs. But I want a condition. You're not in a position to negotiate, Griggs said. Then you're not in a position to have a willing wife. I'll fight you every day. Make your life miserable. Run the first chance I get. She crossed her arms. Or you can agree to my condition. Griggs studied her. What condition? Let me say goodbye. Properly. 1 week. Then I'll come without a fight. How do I know you won't run? You have the marshal. You have the law. Where am I going to run that you can't find me? Griggs considered. Finally nodded. 1 week. But I'm staying in town. And if you're not at the marshal's office next Tuesday at noon, I'll have Carson drag you out of here in chains. Fair enough. Carson looked relieved. 1 week then. Don't make me regret this, Mrs. Griggs. After they left, the three of them turned on Lena. What are you doing? Ruth demanded. Buying time. For what? Lena looked at each of them. For you to help me disappear for real. Not just running to the next town. Actually disappear. Somewhere he can't find me. That's impossible, Martha said. They'll hunt you across the whole territory. Then I'll leave the territory. Go to California, or Montana, or Canada. You'll need money. I have some saved. Not enough, Elias said. He was already thinking. But between all of us, I can't ask you to... Oh, you're not asking. We're offering. Ruth was already moving toward her hiding spot. We get you enough for travel. New name. New start. They'll know you helped. Let them know. That week was a blur of planning. They pooled money again. This time, everything they had. Bought Lena a train ticket to San Francisco, forged identity papers. Ruth knew someone who knew someone. Packed her a bag with clothes, food, enough to get started. And they said goodbye. Not all at once. Each of them in their own way. Ruth gave her a bundle of letters. Introductions. People I know in different cities. If you need help, find them. Martha gave her a knife. Just in case. Elias gave her the bird he'd finally finished carving. Still looked a little like a potato, but it was clearly a bird now. So you remember, he said, that you found the bird inside the potato. Lena held it carefully. I won't forget any of you. You better not. The night before she was supposed to report to Carson, they smuggled her out. Martha drove her to the next town over in the wagon, put her on a train heading west. Lena looked back once as the train pulled away, saw Martha standing on the platform, watching. Then she was gone. The next day, when Lena didn't show, Carson came to the cottage with Griggs. Where is she? Griggs demanded. Gone, Ruth said calmly. I'll have you all arrested. For what? We didn't kidnap her. She left on her own. Carson looked tired. Did she tell you where she was going? No, Elias said. Technically true. She hadn't told him specifically which city she was heading to after San Francisco. I'll find her, Griggs said. And when you do, Martha interrupted, she'll run again, and again, and again, because you can't own a person who refuses to be owned. Griggs stared at them with pure hatred. Then he left. Carson followed, shaking his head. They never saw Lena again. But 6 months later, a letter arrived from San Francisco. No return address, just a few lines in Lena's careful handwriting. I found work, I found friends, I found something like peace. Thank you for digging me out. All my love. And tucked inside, a small wooden bird, perfectly carved. Better than anything Elias had managed. They kept it on the mantel, a reminder that sometimes, despite everything, people got free. The cottage felt emptier after Lena left. Not physically. Her corner had never held much, just a bedroll and a few belongings. But the space she'd occupied was bigger than furniture, bigger than walls. Elias found himself looking for her sometimes, turning to say something, expecting to see her at the woodpile or hauling water, and finding nothing but air. Ruth cried once, just once, locked herself in the loft for an hour and came down with red eyes, refusing to talk about it. Martha got angry instead. Took it out on the wood she was working, on the nails she was hammering. Everything got done with more force than necessary. She made the right choice, she said one evening, practically attacking a fence post. Getting out, starting over. I know, Elias said. So why does it feel like we failed her? Because we wanted to fix everything, make it all right, but some things can't be fixed, just escaped. Martha's hammer came down hard enough to split the wood. She swore through the hammer. I hate that you're right. They adjusted, learned to work as 3 instead of 4. The rhythm was different, but they found it, and slowly, carefully, they started to rebuild in other ways too. The railway's compensation money helped, but it wasn't enough to really thrive, just enough to not starve. So they worked. Elias took carpentry jobs with Martha. Ruth's sewing business picked up again now that the scandal had died down and people decided it was safe to associate with her. They made it through fall, through winter, through another spring. The cottage stood solid now, properly built, insulated, with a roof that didn't leak and windows that closed tight. The barn had livestock again, a proper cow, chickens, 2 goats to replace the one that had been killed. It looked almost respectable, but the railway hadn't forgotten them. Neither had Pierce, apparently, because in March, almost a year after the court ruling, Thomas Wright came riding up with news that made Elias's stomach sink. They're appealing, Wright said. He looked exhausted. Different grounds this time. They're claiming the Territorial Attorney General's investigation was politically motivated, that the evidence was tainted, that the whole case should be retried. Can they do that? Ruth asked. They're doing it. Whether it'll succeed, Wright shrugged. The new territorial judge is more conservative than Thornton, more inclined to side with business interests. So we could lose everything again. Martha's voice was flat. Possibly. We'll need to respond to their filing, present our evidence again. It'll cost... How much? Elias interrupted. Wright named a figure that was somehow worse than before. We don't have that, Ruth said quietly. I know. I'm sorry. After Wright left, they sat in that familiar stunned silence. Elias recognized it now, the feeling of being buried again. Crushed under weight you couldn't fight. We could ask Marcus Webb, Martha suggested. He helped before. Webb moved to California, Ruth said. Took a position with the state government. I saw it in the paper. Then we find another lawyer. With what money? We spent everything we had just getting to this point. So we earn more. Work harder. Martha, we're already working as hard as we can. There aren't enough hours in the day to earn what we'd need. They were going in circles. Elias could feel it. The same arguments, the same desperation. He stood up. I'll sell. Both women looked at him. What? Ruth said. I'll sell the land to the railway. Take whatever they're offering now. Use that money to pay you both back everything you spent fighting for me. Absolutely not, Martha said. It's the only way. It's surrender. After everything we went through, everything Lena sacrificed. Martha's voice rose. You think she ran across half the country just so you could hand Pierce exactly what he wanted? She ran to save herself, not my land. She ran because we all decided we weren't going to keep letting powerful men take whatever they wanted. And if you sell now, you're saying they win. That all of it, the fires, the fear, the fighting, was for nothing. It wasn't for nothing. We tried. We lost. We haven't lost yet, Ruth said quietly. They filed an appeal, that's all. We can fight it. With what money? We'll find it. How? Ruth didn't have an answer. None of them did. That night, Elias lay awake listening to the cottage settle. Through the thin wall, he could hear Ruth and Martha talking in low voices. He couldn't make out words, just tones. Worry, frustration, that edge of panic that came from running out of options. He'd brought this on them. His fight. His refusal to just walk away when the railway first came. His stubbornness had cost them everything. Their savings, their security. Lena's freedom, in a way. Maybe Martha was wrong. Maybe sometimes surrender was the smart choice. He must have fallen asleep eventually because he woke to shouting. Not angry shouting, excited. He stumbled out of bed to find Ruth and Martha already dressed, standing in the kitchen with a newspaper spread across the table. Look, Ruth said, pointing. It was the Denver paper. Front page. A long article about railway corruption, about the Territorial Attorney General's expanded investigation, about criminal charges being filed against multiple railway executives. And there, in the middle of the article, was their story. The land grab, the fires, the court case. Why are they writing about us again? Elias asked. Not us specifically. The pattern, Martha tapped the paper. Turns out we weren't the only ones. The railway did this to dozens of people, used the same tactics, intimidation, arson, fraudulent legal claims. It's all coming out now. There's more, Ruth said. She flipped to the second page. A citizens group is forming. People from all over the territory who were victimized by the railway. They're pooling resources, hiring lawyers, filing a class action suit. Elias read the article twice, then a third time. Is this real? Real as anything. And look, Ruth pointed to a smaller notice at the bottom. They're holding a meeting in Denver next week. Anyone affected by railway land grabs is invited to attend. We should go, Martha said immediately. It's 3 days' travel, Ruth pointed out. So? When has distance ever stopped us? They looked at Elias, waiting. He thought about Lena's letter, about her wooden bird on the mantle, about fighting versus running. We go, he said. They left 2 days later, took the train, ironic, using the railway's own infrastructure to fight them. The trip cost money they couldn't afford, but Ruth had sold some of her better quilts to cover it. Denver was bigger than any place Elias had been since leaving Pennsylvania. Buildings 3-4 stories tall, streets packed with people and wagons and noise. The meeting was held in a church basement that smelled like mildew and old coffee. When they arrived, it was already packed. 50 people, maybe more, farmers and ranchers and shopkeepers, all of them with the same haunted look, people who'd fought and lost or were still fighting. A man in his 40s stood at the front. He introduced himself as Daniel Morrison, a rancher who'd lost half his land to railway claims 2 years ago. I know why you're all here, Morrison said. You've been cheated threatened. Some of you burned out. Some of you bankrupted by legal fees." He paused. "Some of you probably wondering if it's worth still fighting." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. "I'm here to tell you it is worth it, because we're not alone anymore. There are enough of us now that people are paying attention. The Attorney General, the newspapers, the voters." Morrison's voice strengthened. "The railway got away with this for years because they picked us off one by one, made each fight isolated, made each of us think we were the only ones. But we're not the only ones," someone called out. "No, we're not. And together, we have power they didn't account for." Morrison laid out the plan. A coordinated legal strategy. Multiple lawyers working in concert, sharing evidence, filing cases across the territory simultaneously. The cost would be shared among everyone affected. Still expensive, but spread thin enough to be manageable. "We'll need sworn statements from each of you," Morrison continued. "Detailed accounts of what happened. Dates, names, amounts, everything you can remember." "What if we already lost our cases?" someone asked. "Doesn't matter. We're building a pattern, showing systematic fraud. Your case helps prove that." After the main meeting ended, people broke into smaller groups, sharing stories, comparing tactics, finding common threads. Elias found himself talking to a woman named Sarah Chen, the reporter's mother, it turned out. Her family had been burned out 3 years ago. "We thought we were crazy for fighting," Sarah said. "Everyone told us to just move on. But my son kept digging, kept finding more victims, until there were too many to ignore." "How did you survive?" Elias asked. 3 years of fighting." "We didn't, not alone." Sarah gestured around the room. "We found others, helped each other, shared resources. It's the only way any of us made it." Ruth joined them, Martha close behind. "How many people are part of this now?" Ruth asked. 83 families at last count," Sarah said. "More joining every week as word spreads." "And you think it'll work? The class action?" "I think we have a better chance together than we ever did alone." They stayed in Denver for 3 days, gave their statements to a lawyer named Patricia Frost, sharp-eyed, sharp-tongued, the kind of woman who looked like she could dismantle arguments and egos with equal efficiency. "Your case is strong," Frost told them after reviewing everything. "The arson, the fraudulent eminent domain claim, the intimidation. It's textbook corruption." "Will it be enough?" Elias asked. "Alone? Maybe not, but combined with 82 other cases?" Frost smiled. "They're going to have a hard time dismissing all of us as liars or troublemakers." They returned home exhausted but feeling something they hadn't felt in months. Not hope exactly, too fragile for that, but possibility. The class action was filed in May. All 83 cases bundled together, representing over $2 million in damages and stolen land. The railway's response was predictable. Deny everything, claim all land acquisitions had been legal and proper, accuse the plaintiffs of conspiring to defraud. But this time, the newspapers didn't just report the railway's side. They reported both sides, printed excerpts from sworn statements, published photographs of burned buildings and displaced families. Public opinion began to shift. It wasn't dramatic. Not like the first ruling, just a slow turning of the tide. Letters to editors, ministers preaching about justice from their pulpits, territorial legislators suddenly interested in railway regulation. The railway's lawyers fought hard, filed motions to dismiss, to separate the cases, to delay proceedings. But Frost and her team fought back. For every delay tactic, they had a counter-argument, and the case moved forward. Summer turned to fall. The aspens went gold again. Elias helped Martha build a new workshop, bigger than before, properly equipped. Ruth taught sewing classes to young women in town, earning steady money. They were careful with every dollar, but they weren't starving anymore. The preliminary hearings started in October. Judge after judge reviewed segments of the case, ruled on evidentiary questions. Some rulings went their way, some didn't, but they were in it. Fighting, not alone. Letters arrived from other families in the class action, people they'd met in Denver, people they'd never met but felt connected to anyway. Trading news, offering encouragement, building something that looked almost like community. In November, Elias got a letter with a San Francisco postmark. His hand shook as he opened it. Lena's handwriting, longer than before. She'd found work at a factory making textiles. The pay was decent. She'd made friends with other workers, joined a women's labor group that was fighting for better conditions. I read about the class action in the papers out here, she wrote. Sounds like you're giving them hell. Good. They deserve it. I think about all of you every day, about the cottage, about that feeling of finally standing up instead of just enduring. You gave me that. Thank you. There was more. Details about San Francisco, about her life there. But Elias kept coming back to those lines, about standing up, about that gift they'd given her. He showed the letter to Ruth and Martha that evening. She sounds happy, Ruth said softly. She sounds free, Martha corrected. They kept the letter with the first one, with the wooden bird. Small proof that sometimes people escaped, sometimes they won. December brought the first major ruling. Judge Thornton, back on the case now, issued a decision on the evidence, found that the railway had indeed systematically misrepresented its authorized routes. That pattern of fraud was established. This doesn't settle the case, Frost cautioned when she visited to explain the ruling, but it's a strong foundation. The railway can't claim this was all just honest mistakes anymore. So what happens next? Martha asked. Settlement negotiations. They know they're going to lose if this goes to trial. Too much evidence, too much public attention. So they'll try to settle quietly. For how much? Frost named a figure. Not everything they'd lost, but substantial, enough to cover legal fees and then some. What about the land? Elias asked. That's yours. The ruling confirms it. They have no legal claim. It should have felt like victory. Maybe it did, a little. But mostly it felt like exhaustion, like they'd been holding their breath for so long that even relief hurt. The settlement offer came in January. The railway would pay damages to all 83 families, admit no wrongdoing publicly, but agree to reform their land acquisition practices. All contested land would be returned to original owners with clear title. Frost advised them to take it. We could push for more, she said. Go to trial. But trials are expensive and unpredictable. This is good. This is fair. They voted as a group, all 83 families. Took a week to count all the responses. 79 voted to accept. 4 voted to keep fighting. Elias, Ruth, and Martha voted to accept. We won, Ruth said when the final tally came in. We actually won. But she didn't sound triumphant, just tired. The money arrived in March. After legal fees and expenses, each family received roughly half what they'd originally been promised. Not a fortune, but enough. Elias used his share to buy better livestock, to hire help for the spring planting, to pay Ruth and Martha back with interest for everything they'd spent on his behalf. They both refused the interest. We're in this together, Martha said firmly. Equal shares. That was always the deal. So they split the money 3 ways instead. Pooled it like they'd pooled everything else. And then, one evening in late March, sitting on the porch, watching the sunset, Ruth asked the question none of them had voiced yet. What now? What do you mean? Martha was carving something. She'd taken up Lena's habit of whittling. I mean, we won. We got the land. We got compensation. The railway's in disgrace. The case is closed. Ruth looked at both of them. So what happens now? Do we just keep going like before? Why wouldn't we? Elias asked. Because before we were fighting, we had a purpose, a common enemy. Now, she gestured vaguely. Now we're just 3 people living together with no particular reason to stay together. Silence. The kind that felt dangerous. Martha's knife stopped moving. You want to leave? I didn't say that. I'm asking if we're staying because we want to or because we're too tired to figure out what else to do. Does it matter? Elias asked. Either way, we're here. It matters to me. I need to know if this is... Ruth struggled for words. If this is home, or just where we ended up. More silence. Elias thought about Pennsylvania, about his mother's house that had never felt like home even when he lived there, about the mine that had swallowed his father, about running west to escape all of it. He thought about the cottage, about rebuilding it with these 2 women, about meals shared and work divided and victories celebrated and losses endured, about Lena's letter, about standing up instead of enduring. It's home, he said quietly. For me, anyway, it's home. Martha set down her whittling. For me, too. They both looked at Ruth. Her eyes were wet. Good, because I didn't actually want to leave. I just needed to know we're choosing this. Not just defaulting to it. We're choosing it, Martha confirmed. All of us, Elias added. Ruth wiped her eyes. Then I guess we should make it official. Figure out how to actually run this place instead of just surviving it. They spent the next week planning, really planning, for the first time. Not just how to pay next month's bills, but what they wanted the land to become. What they wanted their lives to look like. Martha wanted to expand the carpentry business, hire apprentices, build furniture and sell it in Denver. Ruth wanted to turn her sewing classes into a real school, teach women skills they could use to earn their own money. Elias wanted to farm properly, not just subsistence gardens, but real crops. Maybe start breeding better livestock. They drew up a partnership agreement. Thomas Wright helped them make it legal, equal shares for all three of them, regardless of who technically owned what. Equal say in all decisions, equal distribution of profits and losses. This is unusual, Wright said, reviewing the document. 3 unrelated people entering into a business partnership like this. Everything about us has been unusual, Martha replied. Might as well make it legal. They signed in April. 3 signatures on paper that said they were bound together now by more than circumstance. By choice. The first apprentice arrived in May, a young man named David, whose father had been part of the class action. He wanted to learn carpentry. Martha took him on, teaching him the way she'd learned through work and failure and eventual mastery. Ruth's sewing school started with 3 students. By June, she had 7. By August, 12. Women from town and surrounding ranches, learning skills that might let them earn their own keep, and Elias planted, hired day laborers to help clear more land, put in wheat and corn and vegetables, bought 2 more cows and a decent bull, started building something that looked almost like a real farm. It wasn't easy. Money was tight. The work was endless. They fought sometimes, about expenses, about priorities, about stupid things like whose turn it was to clean the barn. But they fought as equals. As partners, as family. In September, another letter came from Lena. This one included a photograph, her standing with a group of other women in front of a factory. She looked different, thinner, maybe, or just different. Her hair was cut shorter. Her clothes were nicer than anything she'd worn at the cottage. But it was her expression that struck Elias most. She looked directly at the camera. No hesitation, no apology for taking up space. She looked free. She's doing well, Ruth said, studying the photograph. Better than well, Martha said. She's thriving. Do you think she'll ever come back? Elias asked. Would you? If you'd finally escaped? He thought about it, about what it would mean to return to the place where you'd been trapped, even if the trap was gone. No, he admitted. I don't think I would. Neither do I, Martha said. But I'm glad she got out. I'm glad at least one of us got exactly what she wanted. What did she want? Ruth asked. To matter for something besides how much weight she could carry. To be chosen instead of sold. Martha set the photograph carefully on the mantel next to the wooden bird. To be free. They were quiet for a moment, all thinking about Lena, about everything she'd sacrificed, everything she'd gained. We should write her back, Ruth said finally. Tell her about the partnership, about the school, about David and the farm. Tell her we're building something, Martha added. Something that lasts. Elias nodded. Something worth fighting for. They wrote the letter that night, all 3 of them contributing, telling Lena about their victories, their struggles, their plans, about the life they were building in the cottage she'd helped save. Ruth ended the letter with a line that made Elias's throat tight. You're always welcome here. This is your home too, if you ever want it to be. But we understand if you don't. We're just glad you found where you belong. They sent it the next day. Didn't know if Lena would write back. Didn't know if she'd ever return. But that was all right. They'd learned to live with uncertainty, with fighting for things that might not work out, with choosing hope over guarantees. October brought the first frost. Elias's crops came in, not a huge yield, but respectable. Enough to sell some in town. Enough to save seed for next year. Proof that the land could provide if you worked it right. Martha's workshop was operating at full capacity. David had proven to be skilled with his hands. They'd already completed 3 major furniture commissions, and Ruth's school had expanded to 15 students. She was teaching more than sewing now, reading, writing, basic arithmetic. Skills that women weren't always encouraged to learn but desperately needed. The cottage itself had become something of a landmark. People traveling through the valley would sometimes stop. asked to hear the story of the women who'd fought the railway and won. Ruth usually told them no. It's not a story, it's our lives. We don't perform them for entertainment. But occasionally, when the person asking seemed genuinely interested rather than merely curious, one of them would share pieces. Enough to give hope, maybe. Enough to suggest that fighting was sometimes worth it. In November, the Territorial Attorney General's office announced the final results of its investigation. Multiple railway executives were facing criminal charges. The company itself was being broken up, reorganized under new management with strict oversight. Pierce was among those charged. Fraud, extortion, arson. He'd fled to California to avoid prosecution, but warrants had been issued. Elias felt nothing when he heard. Not satisfaction, not vindication, just a kind of hollow acknowledgement that justice, however delayed, sometimes happened. Think he'll ever face trial? Martha asked. Probably not, Ruth said. Men like that usually find a way to escape consequences. Maybe. But at least everyone knows what he did. That counts for something. Winter settled in. Their second winter in the rebuilt cottage. This time they were prepared. Plenty of wood, enough food, adequate insulation. The animals were sheltered. The roof didn't leak. They were comfortable. Not wealthy, but secure. And one evening in December, sitting around the table after dinner, Martha raised her cup. To surviving, she said. To more than surviving, Ruth corrected. To living. To family, Elias added. Chosen family. They drank to that, to the bonds they'd forged through fire and fear and fighting, to the choice to stay together when they could have scattered, to the cottage that had become home. Outside, snow was falling. Inside, the stove burned warm, and three people who'd been buried in different ways, by mountains, by expectations, by circumstance, sat together in the home they'd built. Not perfect. Nothing ever was. But theirs. Earned, fought for, free. Spring came early that year. The snow melted in March instead of April, turning the mountain streams into rushing torrents that carved new paths down slopes that had been reshaped by old landslides. Elias stood at the edge of his property line, looking up at the ridge where his first cabin had been buried. 2 years since the mountain had tried to kill him. 2 years since 3 women had dug him out and changed everything. The scar was still visible, a wide swath of bare earth and scattered timber where the slide had torn through. But new growth was starting. Saplings pushing up through the debris, wildflowers finding purchase in soil that had been churned and exposed. Even mountains healed, given time. You thinking about going back up there? Martha's voice came from behind him. She'd walked up so quietly he hadn't heard her approach. Maybe. See if there's anything left worth salvaging. After 2 years? Doubtful. Probably. But I keep thinking about it. That spot where I almost died. Elias turned to face her. Wondering if I should be afraid of it or just accept it as part of the story. Martha considered this. I don't think it has to be one or the other. You can accept something happened and still be wary of it happening again. That's not fear. That's just sense. They walked back to the cottage together. The farm was taking shape around them, fenced pastures, planted fields showing the first green shoots of spring wheat. The barn had been expanded. A second, smaller building housed Martha's workshop, which now had 2 apprentices instead of 1. Ruth's school had moved to town. The cottage had been too small, and besides, being closer to the students made more sense. She'd rented a building near the general store, hung a sign that read Mountain Valley School for Women. 23 students now, ranging from teenage girls to women in their 50s who'd never learned to read. The cottage was quieter without the constant stream of students, but fuller in other ways. They'd built a proper dining table to replace the small one they'd started with, added chairs, made space for the life they were living instead of just surviving in the space they had. That evening, as they were finishing dinner, someone knocked on the door. Visitors were rare. Most people who wanted to see them came during daylight hours, for business or lessons or carpentry work. Elias opened the door to find a woman in her 30s, well-dressed in traveling clothes. She looked exhausted, like she'd come a long way. I'm looking for Elias Vance, she said, and Ruth Calder and Martha Hale. You found them, Martha said from behind Elias. What's this about? The woman held out an envelope. My name is Catherine Walsh. I'm a lawyer from San Francisco. I've been asked to deliver this personally. Elias took the envelope. It was thick, expensive paper, the kind official documents came in. Who sent it? Ruth asked. I'm not at liberty to say, but I was told to wait for your response and bring it back. They invited her in, offered coffee. Walsh accepted, settling into a chair with the weariness of someone who'd been traveling for days. Elias opened the envelope. Inside were several documents and a letter. He recognized the handwriting immediately. Lena. His hand shook slightly as he read. Dear Elias, Ruth and Martha, the letter began. By the time you read this, Catherine Walsh will have arrived. I've hired her to handle something I should have dealt with a long time ago. I'm buying my freedom, properly, legally, so that Griggs can never claim I belong to him again. I've been working at the textile factory for almost 2 years now, saving every dollar I could. I joined the women's labor group I mentioned before. They've been fighting for better wages, better conditions. We won a strike last fall, got a 20% raise and safer working conditions. That money, combined with what I'd already saved and a loan from the labor group, was enough to hire Catherine. She's drawn up papers to nullify the contract my father signed. I'm paying Griggs twice what he paid my father, with interest. He has no legal grounds to refuse. The contract specified a purchase price, and I'm meeting it. Catherine has his signature on the dissolution agreement. I'm free now, really free. Not just escaped, but legally, permanently free. But here's the thing I need you to understand. I don't want to come back. Elias stopped reading, feeling like he'd been hit. The letter continued. It's not because I don't love you, all three of you. You saved my life in more ways than digging me out of that barn. You showed me what it meant to stand up, to fight, to choose. But the cottage was never really home for me. It was a stopping place, a shelter while I figured out who I was without someone else defining me. And what I figured out is that I belong here, in San Francisco, with the women I work with, fighting for labor rights and fair wages and the idea that women shouldn't have to be owned by anyone. I'm good at it. The organizing, the planning. I can lift heavy things, yes, but I can also lift heavy ideas, carry them until other people see their worth. That's what I was meant to do. Not split wood or haul water, though I'm grateful I learned how, but this, building something bigger than survival. So I'm staying here, but I wanted you to know that I'm free because you helped me learn what freedom meant. And I wanted to make sure that if Griggs ever comes back, you have legal proof that I don't belong to him, that I never did. Thank you for everything, for digging me out, for standing with me, for letting me go when I needed to. With love and gratitude, Lena. Elias passed the letter to Ruth and Martha. They read in silence. When they finished, Ruth wiped her eyes. She's not coming back. No, Elias said, but she's happy. Yes. Martha looked at Catherine Walsh. You met her? Lena? Walsh nodded. I've been working with the women's labor group for 6 months now. Lena's one of their most effective organizers. She's remarkable. Yes, Martha said quietly. She is. Walsh pulled out more documents. She wanted me to give you these as well, copies of the dissolution agreement, proof that the contract with Griggs is void, in case he ever tries to make trouble for you for helping her escape. Will he? Ruth asked. Unlikely. He took the money, signed the papers, and frankly, his reputation in certain circles is not what it was. Word got around about how he acquired a wife. It didn't reflect well on him. They talked with Walsh for another hour. She told them more about Lena's work, about the strikes and negotiations and small victories that were changing how factories treated women workers. About Lena's role in all of it, not as a leader exactly, but as someone who could carry the weight when others got tired. The same thing she'd always done, but choosing what to carry now, and who to carry it for. Walsh left the next morning, promising to deliver their response to Lena. They'd written back together, all three of them adding their own messages, telling her they understood. They were proud. They missed her but wouldn't ask her to come back, telling her that home was always here if she needed it, but they understood she'd built a different home. And that was exactly right. After Walsh rode away, the three of them sat on the porch in the morning sun. We're not getting her back, Martha said. Statement, not question. No, Elias agreed. Good. She deserves better than us anyway. That's not true, Ruth said sharply. We gave her... We gave her a place to hide while she figured out who she was. But we didn't give her purpose. She found that herself. Martha stood, stretched. And that's how it should be. We all found our own purposes. Hers just took her somewhere else. Elias thought about that, about the four of them, all running from different things, all finding each other by accident and necessity, all fighting together until they'd won enough to choose what came next. Lena had chosen San Francisco, labor organizing, a different kind of fight, and he'd chosen this, the land, the farm, the family he'd built with Ruth and Martha, not running anymore, just living. The farm grew that summer. Elias hired 2 more workers, men from families in the class action suit who needed steady work. They planted more acres, built better fences, started breeding cattle with actual attention to bloodlines and quality. Ruth's school kept expanding. She hired an assistant teacher, a young woman named Alice, who'd been one of her first students and had shown an aptitude for teaching. They were offering classes 6 days a week now, teaching skills that ranged from basic literacy to bookkeeping to sewing complicated patterns. "I'm building something that lasts," Ruth told Elias one evening. "When I'm gone, this school will still be here, still teaching women how to support themselves. That matters." Martha's workshop had become the best carpentry operation within 50 miles. Her apprentices, there were 3 now, were producing furniture that sold in Denver for prices that made Elias's farming income look modest. She'd turned down offers to relocate to the city, to expand faster. "I like it here," she said simply. "Why would I leave?" In August, a letter arrived from Thomas Wright. He'd been elected to the territorial legislature, was working on reforms to eminent domain law, trying to prevent what had happened to them from happening to anyone else. "Your case made the difference," he wrote. "The publicity, the class action. It showed people that the law could be used to crush ordinary citizens or protect them. Now we're trying to make sure it protects them. Small victories, not perfect, but movement in the right direction." September brought news that Pierce had been arrested in California, extradited back to Colorado to face charges. The trial was scheduled for November. "You planning to attend?" Martha asked when they heard. Elias thought about it, about seeing Pierce in chains, about testifying if needed. "No," he decided. "That part's over. Let the courts handle it." "You sure? Might be satisfying to watch him squirm." "Might be, but I don't need it." Elias looked around the cottage, at the life they'd built. "We already won. What happens to him doesn't change that." Ruth nodded approval. "Let it go. Move forward." So they did. October brought the harvest. The best one yet. Enough wheat to sell a substantial portion, enough corn to feed the livestock through winter with plenty left over. The cattle had bred successfully. The farm was turning a real profit now, not just breaking even. They celebrated with the dinner that included people who'd become friends over the years. David and his father, Alice from the school, Samuel Chen, the reporter who'd written the first article and had continued following their story. A few neighboring farmers who'd stopped seeing them as scandalous and started seeing them as successful. The cottage couldn't hold everyone, so they ate outside under the stars. Someone had brought a fiddle. Someone else had brought whiskey that was probably illegal, but tasted like fire and freedom. Elias found himself watching it all, the people, the laughter, the easy way they moved around each other. This was what winning looked like, not a court ruling or a newspaper article. This, community, belonging, people choosing to gather because they wanted to, not because they had to. Late that night, after everyone had left, the 3 of them sat around the dying fire. "I've been thinking," Ruth said, "about making this official, the partnership, the land, all of it." "It's already official," Martha pointed out. "We have papers." "I mean more official. I want to deed my share to both of you, equal thirds, so that when I die—" Ruth said, "When I die," she continued firmly, "there's no question about who inherits what. No distant relatives showing up with claims. It all stays with you two, and you do the same with your shares. So it always belongs to all of us, even when one of us is gone." Elias understood what she was saying, not just legal protection. A statement that this wasn't temporary. This was family, real and permanent and chosen. "All right," he said. "All right," Martha echoed. They drew up the papers that winter. Thomas Wright handled it, making sure it was ironclad legal. each of them deeding their share to the others, with the provision that it stayed in the partnership unless all three agreed to dissolve it. "This is unusual," Wright said again, but he was smiling now. "And exactly right." They signed in February, 3 years after Elias had been buried by the mountain. 3 years of fighting and building and choosing each other. The deed was registered, legal, permanent. That spring, Lena's letters started coming more regularly. She'd been promoted to a leadership position in the labor group, was traveling to other cities, helping women organize, making real change in how factories operated, how women were paid, how they were treated. "I met someone," one letter said. "Her name is Margaret. She's a teacher at a school for immigrant children. We're close. I don't know what to call it. But she makes me happy, makes me feel like I'm enough exactly as I am." Ruth read that letter aloud, then set it down carefully. She found what she needed. "Someone who sees her," Martha said, "really sees her." "Like we did," Elias added. "Like we tried to," Ruth corrected. "But Margaret sees her in ways we couldn't, because she's seen Lena as she is now, not as she was when she was still figuring out how to be free." More seasons passed, more harvests, more students graduating from Ruth's school with skills that let them earn their own money, make their own choices. More furniture from Martha's workshop, each piece marked with her signature, a small carved bird in honor of Lena. The cottage became something of a symbol in the valley, the place where people had fought power and won, where a different way of living had taken root, not traditional, not what people expected, but working, thriving. People asked them for advice sometimes, how to fight legal battles, how to organize, how to survive when everything seemed impossible. Ruth always said the same thing: you find people who'll stand with you, and you stand with them. Everything else follows from that. In the 5th year, Pierce's trial finally concluded. He was convicted on multiple counts of fraud and extortion, sentenced to 15 years in territorial prison. The news arrived in a newspaper Elias almost didn't buy. He read the article twice, felt nothing but a distant satisfaction that justice had eventually happened. "It's done," he told Ruth and Martha that evening. "Was there ever any doubt?" Martha asked. "Always. Until it actually happens, there's always doubt." "Well, now there's none. He's gone. That chapter's closed." They burned the newspaper that night in the stove, watched the pages curl and blacken. Let that part of the story turn to ash. What remained was the life they'd built, the land they'd fought for, the family they'd chosen. In the 6th year, Ruth's school had 40 students. Alice had become a full partner in running it, and they'd hired 2 more teachers. Women were coming from other valleys now, traveling for days to learn skills that might let them escape bad marriages, abusive fathers, crushing poverty. "You're changing lives," Elias told Ruth one evening. "We're giving them tools," she corrected. "They're changing their own lives. I'm just the door they walk through." Martha's workshop had expanded again. 5 apprentices now, all learning not just carpentry, but business, management, accounting. She was teaching them to be independent, to start their own shops eventually. "Why train your competition?" someone had asked her once. "Because there's enough work for everyone," Martha had replied. "And because the point isn't to build an empire, it's to build something good that keeps going after I'm gone." Elias's farm was profitable enough that he'd started helping other farmers, sharing techniques, lending equipment, advising on crop rotation and breeding programs, not charging for it, just helping because he could. "You're basically running an agricultural school yourself," Ruth pointed out. "Maybe. But I'm not organizing it, just answering questions when people ask. That's still teaching, still passing on what you know." He supposed it was. All 3 of them, in different ways, building things that would outlast them, that would keep helping people after they were gone. That was its own kind of freedom, not just surviving, not just thriving, but creating something that made the world a little better. In the 7th year, Lena sent a photograph of herself and Margaret. They were standing together outside a building with a sign that read, "Women's Labor Alliance, San Francisco Chapter." Both of them were smiling, Lena's arm around Margaret's shoulders. On the back, Lena had written, "We're opening a school, teaching factory workers to read and organize, combining what you taught me with what I learned here, building something that lasts. Thank you for showing me how." They put the photograph on the mantle next to the wooden bird, proof that what they'd built had spread beyond these mountains. that the fight went on, in different forms, in different places. One evening that fall, as they sat on the porch watching the sun set behind peaks that had once tried to bury Elias, Martha asked a question that had been unspoken for years. "Do you think we'll ever be respectable?" Ruth laughed. "Why would we want to be?" "I'm not saying I want to be. I'm asking if you think the town will ever see us as anything but three strange people living in an unusual arrangement." "No," Elias said. "They'll always think we're strange, and they'll probably always be a little scandalized. But I don't think they see us as threatening anymore. Just different." "Different's better than threatening," Ruth said. "And honestly, respectable sounds boring." "It does, doesn't it?" Martha smiled. "I'd rather be useful than respectable anyway." They sat in comfortable silence as the light faded. Elias thought about everything that had led to this moment. The mountain that had buried him, the women who dug him out, the railway that had tried to steal everything, the fights they'd won and won again. He thought about Lena, free in San Francisco, building a different life. He thought about Ruth's students, learning skills that would let them escape their own burials. He thought about Martha's apprentices, learning to build things that would last. And he thought about himself, the man who'd run from Pennsylvania to escape being crushed, who'd almost died in Colorado, who'd been given a second chance by people who had no reason to save him, who'd learned that sometimes being buried was just the beginning, that sometimes you dug yourself out, and sometimes you got dug out by people who understood what it meant to need saving. "We did all right," he said quietly. "We did better than all right," Ruth corrected. "We won." "Did we?" Martha asked. "Sometimes I can't tell if we won or if we just survived long enough that they stopped trying to crush us." "Both," Elias said. "Both things are true. We survived, and that survival was its own kind of victory." 8 years after the landslide, Elias stood on the ridge where his first cabin had been buried. The scar was almost gone now, covered by new growth. Young trees were pushing up through soil that had been torn apart and remade. Wildflowers carpeted the slope in colors that hadn't existed when the mountain was stable. Martha and Ruth stood beside him. They'd hiked up together, wanting to see the place where everything had started. "You ever think about what would have happened if we'd walked past that day?" Ruth asked. "If we'd decided you weren't our problem?" "Yes," Elias admitted. "I think about it a lot." "And?" "And I'd be dead. The railway would have taken the land. Griggs would still own Lena. All of it would have gone different. But we didn't walk past," Martha said. "We dug you out, and everything that came after came from that choice." They stood there looking at the rebuilt forest, at the evidence that even devastation could become something new and living. "I'm glad you dug me out," Elias said. "We're glad too," Ruth replied. They walked back down the mountain together. Three people who'd chosen each other when they could have scattered. Who'd built something that looked like family because it was family. Not blood, not law. Just choice, over and over again. That evening, they received a telegram from San Francisco, unusual enough that they all gathered around when Elias opened it. It was from Lena. "Griggs died. Heart attack. You're safe now. I'm safe now. We're all free. Coming to visit next spring. Want you to meet Margaret. With love, L." Ruth's hands were shaking as she read it. "He's dead. Actually dead." "We're safe," Martha echoed. They should have felt relief. They did feel relief. But there was something else too, a kind of hollowness. They'd spent so many years being afraid of Griggs coming back, building defenses, preparing for a fight that now would never come. "I don't know what to feel," Ruth admitted. "Me neither," Elias said. "Relief," Martha decided. "Just relief. He can't hurt anyone anymore. Lena's free. We're free. That's enough." She was right. It was enough. They spent that winter preparing for Lena's visit, fixed up the cottage, made plans, worried about stupid things like whether they had enough nice dishes and whether the barn was presentable. "She lived in the barn for months," Martha pointed out. "I think she'll survive seeing it again." "That's different. That was survival. This is," Ruth gestured vaguely, "this is showing her what we built. I want it to be good." "It is good. I want it to be better than good." Spring came, and with it Lena. She arrived on a Tuesday, stepping down from the stagecoach with Margaret beside her. Elias barely recognized her at first. She'd filled out, Not heavy like before, but solid, healthy. Her clothes were well made, her hair was styled. She looked prosperous in a way that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with self-possession. And Margaret was lovely, small and dark-haired, with eyes that saw everything and a smile that suggested she knew exactly who she was and didn't apologize for it. Lena saw them waiting and stopped, just for a moment. Her face did something complicated, joy and grief and recognition all at once. Then she was moving, running actually, and Ruth was running too, and they collided in a hug that looked like it might break bones. Martha joined them, then Elias. All four of them standing in the middle of the road, holding each other, crying and laughing at the same time. Margaret waited patiently, smiling. When they finally broke apart, Lena wiped her eyes. "You look good, all of you." "So do you," Ruth said. "Better than good. You look happy." "I am happy." Lena turned to Margaret, held out her hand. "Come meet my family." They spent 3 days showing Lena and Margaret everything. The farm, the school, the workshop, the cottage they'd rebuilt, the town that had once whispered about them but now mostly just accepted them as part of the landscape. Lena walked through it all like someone visiting a museum of her own history, touching things, remembering. "This is where I split wood," she said, standing by the woodpile. "Every morning for 6 months, trying to work hard enough that nobody would notice I was broken." "You weren't broken?" Martha said. "I was, but I healed." Lena looked at the mountains. "Here, with all of you. And then in San Francisco, with Margaret and the labor group and work that mattered. But the healing started here. On the last evening, they sat around the table, all 5 of them now, and Lena told them everything about the factory work, the strike, the organizing, meeting Margaret, opening the school, building a life that looked nothing like what anyone had expected for her. "I'm not coming back," she said, making it explicit. "This visit isn't about coming home. It's about showing you that I'm all right, that what you gave me, the courage to fight, to choose, it took root. It grew. I wanted you to see that." "We see it," Elias said. "And we're proud," Ruth added. "So damn proud," Martha said, her voice rough. Lena smiled. "I want you to come visit us in San Francisco, see what we're building, meet the other women in the Alliance, see that the fight goes on, just in different forms." "We'll come," Ruth promised. They put Lena and Margaret on the stagecoach 3 days later. More hugs, more tears, but different tears this time. Not loss. Just love and distance, and the knowledge that chosen family doesn't stop being family just because geography separates it. Lena looked back as the stage pulled away, lifted her hand in a wave. Then she turned forward, toward whatever was coming next. "She's really not coming back," Ruth said as they watched the stage disappear. "No," Elias agreed. "But that's all right. She's where she belongs." "And we're where we belong." Yes. They walked back to the cottage together. 3 people who'd survived being buried in different ways, who'd dug each other out, who'd built something that lasted not because it was perfect, but because they kept choosing it. The farm spread out around them. The school stood in town. The workshop hummed with activity. All of it built on the foundation of that first choice: to dig instead of walk away, to fight instead of surrender, to stand together instead of scatter. 10 years after the landslide, Elias's land was worth 10 times what the railway had offered. Not that he was selling. The farm was established now, known across the territory for quality cattle and good wheat. People came to learn from him, to ask advice, to see what was possible when you worked land you actually owned. Ruth's school had graduated over 300 women. Some of them had started their own businesses. Some had become teachers themselves. Some had just learned to read well enough to understand what contracts said before they signed them. All of them had learned they were capable of more than they'd been told. Martha's workshop had trained 27 apprentices. 14 of them had started their own carpentry businesses across Colorado and beyond. Every piece of furniture they made carried a small carved bird, Lena's mark, spreading across the territory. And Lena herself was in San Francisco, organizing factory workers, teaching women to read and fight, living with Margaret in an apartment near the waterfront. Free in ways that went beyond contracts and laws. Free in the ways that mattered most. 4 people who'd been buried by mountains, by expectations, by circumstances beyond their control. 4 people who dug themselves out, sometimes alone, sometimes together. Not one of them would ever be called conventional. Not one of them lived the life they were supposed to want. But they were free. All of them, in their own ways. And that, Elias thought, was what winning really meant. Not defeating enemies, not accumulating wealth or status or respect. Just the freedom to choose, to build, to love who you loved and live how you lived, and refuse to be crushed by people who thought they owned the world. The mountain had tried to bury him once. The railway had tried to take everything. Griggs had tried to own Lena. The world had tried to tell all of them they didn't matter. But they'd fought back, together. And they'd won. Not perfectly, not completely, with scars and losses and compromises along the way, but they'd won. That evening, sitting on the porch with Ruth and Martha, watching another sunset paint the mountains gold, Elias felt something he'd spent most of his life chasing. Peace. Not the absence of struggle. They'd always be fighting something, weather, economics, their own stubbornness, but peace in knowing this was enough, this life, this family, this choice. "I'm glad the mountain buried me," he said quietly. Ruth and Martha both looked at him. "Really?" Martha asked. "Really? Because if it hadn't, I never would have found this. Found you. Found out what it means to be dug out by people who choose to save you." "We didn't save you," Ruth said. "We just didn't leave you buried. You saved yourself. We just gave you time to do it." "Same thing." "No, it's not. Saving yourself is harder, takes longer, costs more." She looked at the mountains. "But it lasts. What other people give you can be taken away. What you build yourself stays." Elias thought about that. About everything he'd built with his own hands, the farm, the fences, the life. About everything Ruth and Martha had built, the school, the workshop, the legacy. About what Lena had built in San Francisco, not given to her, built. "We all saved ourselves," he said finally. "We just did it together." "That's how it works best," Martha replied. They sat there as the sun dropped below the peaks and the stars came out. The cottage stood solid behind them. The land stretched out in all directions. The future waited, unknowable, but theirs to shape. 3 people who'd learned that being buried wasn't the end, just a different kind of beginning. 3 people who'd chosen each other when they could have chosen safety or solitude or surrender. 3 people who'd built something worth fighting for. And somewhere in San Francisco, a 4th person was doing the same. Building, fighting, choosing freedom over and over again. The woman they'd called unwanted had become unstoppable, and the 3 who'd stood with her had become unbreakable. Not perfect, not finished, not without scars, but free. Finally, completely, permanently free. And that was worth every fight, every loss, every moment of doubt. The mountain had buried them all in different ways, but they dug themselves out, together. And that made all the difference.